tomorrow, the president is going to get a briefing from the CIA on his desk. What should be in that briefing?
That's a great question. It's going to be a different briefing than it was yesterday, which is, it goes without saying, but at the same time, what we're finding in the intelligence community, both publicly and non-publicly, is that assessments have not been accurate. For about 2.5 years now, intelligence assessments have not been accurate. If you recall, America misassessed what was going to happen in Afghanistan with the withdrawal. America did not correctly assess how fast Russia and Ukraine was going to resolve. America did not anticipate what was going to happen between Israel and Hamas, let alone Israel's incursions then into Lebanon and now into the Golan Heights. And for sure, the United States was unprepared for what happened in Syria over the last 2 to 3 weeks. So the big question is, why are the assessments wrong, and how do you fix that moving forward? Now, one thing that's not being talked about in the press that should be talked about in the press is that ever since 9/11, we've known as a federal government that one of the most vulnerable points for American national security is the transition period between the end of one election and the emergence of a new president, the first 100 days of a new president. So 9/11 happened during that window. What we're seeing right now is that window has presented itself again. And inside of that window, what have you seen? You've seen the Oreshnik come out of Russia. You've seen Ukraine start firing American weapons. You've seen Biden approve more money than he believes Trump will approve. You've seen Syria completely change handoff and take over. You've seen Israel make incredible progress in the Golan Heights. We're seeing people exploiting what is now known as a vulnerable period for America. What else are we yet to see? Because January 6th is when the new president is ratified, but there's still generally another 100 days after that before they start taking active charge. So whatever the current CIA is seeing, Director Burns is seeing, has got to be speaking about assessments that he doesn't trust. And the incoming CIA Director, Ratcliffe, most likely, has to be preparing for the fact that he doesn't know if he can trust the assessments he's getting.
That's interesting. So in that situation, what can Ratcliffe do to figure out, what can Ratcliffe do to be able to trust the agents in the field?
It's not a problem with the agents in the field. And this is a great thing that we're seeing with Kash Patel, the nominee for the FBI director. One of the things non-publicly, again, that's happening, but people don't see it happening, is that Donald Trump is bringing in people that are publicly known, but not necessarily qualified for the positions that he's nominating them for. And that's got the world in an uproar. And the media is talking about that. What the media is not talking about is the incredible amount of effort that's happening on the back end, where Trump is trying to build advisory panels that are very knowledgeable about the topics. So he essentially wants his cronies to come in and support him in their positions, but he's backfilling them with advisors that know what the hell they're talking about. This isn't a new model. This is something that's been happening ever since the second George Bush that we know of, where they bring in cronies, but then they support the cronies with advisors. It's just happening in a different way with Donald Trump. So Kash Patel has come in and he's made it very clear. He doesn't trust the senior echelons of FBI. And his efforts to try to rout out troubled factors at FBI is really going to be looking at the leadership of FBI, not looking at the rank and file. Ratcliffe's doing the same thing. He knows that the working level field operator, field analyst, field tech ops person hasn't been politicized yet. They're still ideologically predisposed to serving American interests. It's not until 3, 4, 5 tours in 12, 15 years of service that you start thinking, well, how do I maximize my retirement? How do I get to the top of the food chain before I punch out? How do I make, because that's when you start having kids that are in high school age getting onto college. That's when you start having your first or second divorce that you're trying to fund. It becomes difficult.
The first or second divorce you're trying to fund.
I mean, that's
a realistic way to look at it. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard when you are a field operator. You do 3 phenomenal tours. You don't have any problem making $80,000 a year to live in Washington, D.C. or capitals around the world. And then you come back to a spouse that's disappointed because for the last 10 years, you've picked a different spouse over that person. You've picked a career over your partner. And then there's a divorce. And then you lose half your net worth. And then you're 40 years old making $90,000 a year, but everything's cut in half and your spouse takes it. And everybody you love and everyone you believe in is gone and you're left with a career. So you rebuild again and you double down in that career. Those are the people that become the problem, because those are the people who rise up in power through a process that we call riding coattails. Some people call it having a rabbi. Some people call it having a godfather. You're not the most qualified. You're just loyal to the person above you, who's loyal to the person above them, who's loyal to the person above them. All of a sudden, the people in their last 10 years of service are much less loyal to the American people than the people in the first 10 years of their career. Ratcliffe, I think, knows that. Kash Patel knows that. So as they come in from the outside, they can kick the hornet's nest with very little cause for repercussion.
So what becomes the play? How do they do this well? How do we solve the deep state problem?
So first, I don't like to call it the deep state problem. I think it's more of a inefficiency, government incompetence problem, because it's not about meritorious service. It's not about having skills in your job that take you up to the top. It's about who you're loyal to that takes you up to the top. That becomes the exact same problem that we see people criticizing in Russia, in Israel, in Iran, where leadership doesn't want to brief up the truth. They don't want to tell their senior leaders bad news because they're afraid. They're afraid that if I brief up bad news, I'll be held accountable, or if I brief up bad news, I'll be punished, or whatever else. I won't be in the rabbi's good graces anymore, so I'll get kicked out. Well, what do you think led to all the bad assessments in the intelligence arena for the United States over the last 2 years?
So you're saying the people on the front line, they get what's going on, they report what's going on, but then people are afraid of the messenger being killed, and so they lie.
Sort of. I'm going to get too much in the weeds so that you can pull me out to where it's helpful.
Yeah.
A field operator will write, on average, between 2 and 4 reports a day, right? So a field core collector, they're called for CIA, will write between 2 and 4 reports a day. Those 2 and 4 reports that are written to be delivered to Langley, Virginia, headquarters for CIA. But they won't get to Langley for between 48 and 21 or 2 days and 3 days, because for the next 2 to 3 days, they'll sit in the queue in their field office and be edited by middle management. Edited to say what middle management wants to make sure Langley hears, but is different than what actually happened.
Right. Is it as innocent as spin, or is it really, I got to find a way to say this that's not going to raise the blood pressure of my godfather?
It's 3 things, really. There's spin to make sure that they can secure more funds for operations in the future. So if I'm having a mediocre operation, it might get spun to sound more optimistic so that we can secure funding next quarter for the continuation of this operation. So there is spin. Then there's also, we don't want to raise eyebrows. We don't want to raise blood pressure. So we'll dampen down a little bit of the more concerning parts and we'll amp up a little bit of the more comforting parts. So now we might tamper down the fact that the case officer didn't do a complete SDR, or the case officer didn't fulfill a report about something else, whatever. We'll damp down the bad news, pump up the good news so that it just kind of skates through Langley. And then the third piece is that what we want to do is we also want to make sure that we don't give anybody the impression that we're doing something wrong. Because the last thing that senior management wants in the field is somebody at Langley to come back and say, what are you thinking, letting this person do this or do that? So receipts, expenses, how many operations they're doing in a week, how many operations they're doing in a day, all of that will get kind of massaged. So there's a lot of massaging that happens before it even leaves the field office to get to Langley. And then when it gets to Langley, it hits what's known as an operating desk. Operations desks are managed by the lowest level, youngest officers. And then those operating officers at the desk will be the ones that read 15 reports, but then only highlight the most important 3 or 4 for their supervisor, who highlights the most important 1 or 2 for his supervisor or her supervisor, who highlights the most important 1 or 2 that goes to the analysis wing that makes the president's daily brief.
That is an absolutely brilliant breakdown of the problem, because it's so mundane, it's so human. This is exactly what I know people to be like. Do you view this as an intractable problem that we will never be able to solve?
This is where I have my reservations. I'm optimistic but reserved in my optimism for what Donald Trump is trying to do with the new organization that he created, DOGE, Is that what the new organization is?
Yeah.
That
Department of Governmental Efficiency. Yes.
Because the government is inherently inefficient. That's what it was built to be. It wasn't accidentally made to be inefficient. It was built to be inefficient so that it could withstand the constant transition of change in government.
We have to define, and maybe I'm debating you, but there's two kinds of inefficiency. There's gridlock, which I think the government was literally designed to do. And if people understand the difference between Congress and Senate, they will understand the Senate is meant to cool down the emotions of the Congress, which has everything to do with how they're elected. Originally, the Senate wasn't even elected. So you have Congress, very sensitive to their constituents, Senate, not so much, meant to cool it down, right versus left, meant to gridlock so that only the things that both sides agree on get through.
Right.
But then there's the inefficiencies that you just described, which is what I will call, it's humans acting in their individual best interest. So I understand that, but it equates to lunacy. So it's all short-term thinking, never long-term thinking.
I agree with what you're saying. And I would still say that the government was designed to be
both kinds of
operationally inefficient. Correct.
Was it designed to have the short-term thinking versus long-term thinking?
No. It was designed to be slow to make progress. So even though you've got the built-in gridlock, to use your term, you've got the gridlock element to make sure that bipartisan or the best ideas make it to the top, survive the gridlock. There's that idea. But then those things have to be implemented. That's where the operational inefficiency comes in. So you also have to consider the fact that the government has to survive. We've talked about this, you and I, before. The government of the American people has to survive even more so than the American people themselves, right? If we were to have something happen that wiped out 2/3 of the American population, if the US government existed, then the idea of America exists. Therefore, we survive. It's no longer an existential threat to have something that kills 2/3 of the population. That's how the government was built. So the reason you have so many government jobs, the reason you have so many government offices, the reason you have so many government middle managers is essentially to build in an inefficiency that makes it so that progress happens slowly. So that a president can come in and have a great idea that everybody agrees to the last year of their term. The world changes 2 months later, 6 months later, a new president takes over, and then they come up with a new great idea. Over all that volatility of 2 years, the actual operation of bringing the first good idea to light never really takes off. That's how the government is built. It's built so that you can't be a hotshot second-year officer that immediately becomes the director of CIA. You have to serve the 15 years before you get a chance on the 7th floor. That's how it's built. Completely the opposite of the way that the corporate world is built. Like, it's completely the opposite of the way that the American dream is built.
How is it different than the corporate world?
In the corporate world, if you're badass sales, badass marketing, badass product, you can shoot right to the top. If you've got proven value over everyone else, you can go right to the head of the line. And then you can hold the head of the line until you either melt down or a competitor creeps up that's superior to you. You see it especially in the arts. How many actors, musicians, artists come in, they're unknown, they create a work of brilliance, of genius. The population gets behind them, money gets behind them, investors get behind them, they shoot to the top of their game, they burn out on drugs, they burn out on something else, they fall, they crash to the bottom, maybe they reinvent themselves, they scream back up to the top. Like, we've seen this dozens of times. You see movies are made about artists who have had that exact kind of skyrocket and crash, right? The government can't afford that. That is dangerous to government operations. So they tamp all that down by forcing an inefficiency, by forcing a minimum number of years of service before you're eligible for promotion. Nobody can promote higher than one level above where they currently are. So you can't.
Was that defined by the founding fathers, though, or is this something that's arisen over time?
That's something that's arisen over time.
Yeah, see, I think we have to tease out the government was designed to do this. When I hear that, I hear founding fathers. And the government with a blind watchmaker has ended up like this. And so call it evolutionary design. Because I think that the gridlock, intentional. Founding fathers wanted that. They knew human nature well enough. it sounds to me like what you don't like calling the deep state, which I like calling the deep state, only because if you accept this as this is just how humans are, they're going to go through that divorce. They're going to need to fund it. So they're suddenly going to be looking for their godfather who wants a loyalist below them, who thusly is loyal to the person above them. Like, I get how that all plays out. But if you don't attack that, then I think you have a problem. Now, here's the only difference that I see between the government and corporate America. Corporate America can't hide because you will go out of business. The government can steal the money of its constituents. Really, truly. The more I look at this, the more I realize that's exactly what's happening. And because the government can steal money and they don't have to get you to vote for everything, they can just keep doing this forever and ever and ever, operating at these huge losses from a deficit perspective. And there's all kinds of mechanisms by which they will sooner take us to war instead of confronting the fact that they just need to stop spending the money. Okay, so corporate America, cold hard reality of being out in the marketplace. If you don't have enough money to make payroll, you go out of business. This is why the banking industry deranges, because the government basically does the same thing with the banking industry. And so it's no longer true capitalism. Because the government isn't true capitalism, this thing that I call the deep state, to wake people up so they understand it is sinister, in as much as, yes, it's just an echo of human foibles and weakness. I get that. I understand how each individual actor thinking short term makes the decisions that they make. But if we were able to point at and say, this is the KPI that this government, and this is really what Doge is about, this is a KPI that this department is held accountable to. And if you don't hit that, then we're going to start firing people. And it's that simple. And I think that once you understand, it was not designed that way with intention by well-meaning people anyway. It was designed by selfish, short-term people over evolutionary time frames within, governmental structures. I mean, obviously the last couple hundred years. But we should not want that, as far as I can tell. And we should want to bust that up. But it seems like you think there's a good thing here.
No. So
we want to smooth out the volatility.
Yeah. It's just to be clear, I don't think there's a big gap between you and I. In terms of our ambitions for what we want the future to look like. I would even go to say, in terms of the imperatives that you and I know the future must look like, I don't think there's a big gap between us. I think where there is a gap between us is in the battlefield truth. And the battle, as an example, right? The federal government does not use work instructions.
What does that mean?
A corporation uses work instructions, meaning you can hire a new person, bring them into an office, and you can literally give them access
SOPs.
to a folder, standard operating procedures. Standard operating procedures, in my in my experience in corporate America and in our business at Everyday Spy, we create SOPs, which are standard operating procedures. Here's the standard operation of how you bring a product to market. Here's a standard operating procedure of how you run a marketing campaign. And then inside that SOP, we have links to work instructions, which tell you step-by-step checklists, how you do each thing that must be done inside the SOP. The government does not use work instructions, and by and large, the government does not use SOPs. Most of the government is written on the back of what's known as institutional knowledge and on-the-job training, OJT. So a new person comes in, they go through training, they go through onboarding and orientation, and then they go to their office where they're taught through some senior person or mid-rank person how to actually do the job. It's not documented. There's rarely a checklist. There's rarely a work instruction. There's rarely an SOP. The military does the best job of having actual checklists, and those checklists you just follow them blindly, so they don't live like a work instruction. They don't get updated with new technology updates. They don't get updated with new systematic software updates. They exist until they're rewritten, and then they exist again. That type of continuity is a very difficult thing for the government. They don't have a best practice around that because, to your exact point, short-term interests, people want to make sure they always have a job. If they make a work instruction and an SOP, that could lead to an automation that could cost them their job. And inside the federal government, all you have to do, there's a saying, you just wait out your leadership change. Because every year, somebody has to get promoted. Every 2 years, somebody new gets appointed. Every 4 years, somebody new gets elected. So if you're a government employee, you just can sit there and wait because the change happens faster than your own reported progress in your job. So the reason that you have this backlog of inefficiency isn't because the founding fathers wanted it. I don't know that the founding fathers could visualize the technology and the progress that we've made this quickly. I think that what's happened instead is human beings have taken office. They've done what they needed to do to survive. The government evolves slower than the corporate sector. Technology is different. Upgrades are different. Software is different. Government still uses Windows technology that's 20 years old because it hasn't been certified yet as safe for government systems. You see what I'm saying? It's terrible, man, but it's the reality of it. I'm excited for DOGE. I'm excited for an Office of Government Efficiency, but I have seen what's happened with the Office of Government Accountability, and I've seen what challenges it's had because the people who make the laws that dictate the hiring practices for government, the people that make the laws that dictate the promotion and remuneration requirements for the government, those laws all have to be changed in order for something like DOGE to actually make significant changes.
Laws have to be changed?
So how you're hired, how you're fired.
There are laws around how you're hired and fired.
That's a fair point. I don't know that there's legislative laws at a federal level. I would want to double check that. But the government policies, in order for something to be a policy in a federal government, it goes through multiple layers of bureaucracy to be approved as a policy. Not like a corporate policy where somebody just pencils something in and then that's corporate policy.
Jesus Christ. We'll get back to the episode with Andrew Bustamante in a minute, but first, we need to talk about protecting your wealth. Whether you're holding dollars in the bank, crypto in a digital wallet, or stocks in your portfolio, you're putting your trust in a system you can't control. That's why I'm excited to tell you about something that completely changes the game. Goldbacks have done what was previously thought impossible. They've made real gold practical for everyday use. Each goldback contains a precise amount of pure gold, protected by advanced anti-counterfeiting features like UV reactive ink and unique serial numbers. Goldbacks are strengthening local economies. When you pay with goldbacks, you're keeping wealth within your community. No transaction fees, no digital footprint, just direct exchanges between people and businesses. Since 2019, Goldbacks have put over $100 million worth of gold currency into circulation. If you want to be a part of this monetary revolution, go to alpinegold.com and use code IMPACT to get Goldbacks today. Again, that's alpinegold.com, code IMPACT. We need to talk about your online security. Your password, the one you use for your banking, your email, and your social media, might be up for sale on the dark web right now for less than $1. Cybersecurity is a huge concern for me, especially as a game developer. I'm all too aware of how many points of vulnerability we have, and here is why. One breach is all it takes for hackers to access everything you own. That's why I'm excited to partner with RoboForm Password Manager. RoboForm creates and manages strong, unique passwords for every site you use. One click and you're securely logged in. No memorizing, no compromises. Consider RoboForm your complete digital security system. It autofills forms, securely shares access, and monitors your accounts for weak and breached passwords. The next cyber attack is coming. Protect yourself. Click the link in the show notes and get 60% off your first year with RoboForm. Stop making it easy for hackers. Get RoboForm now. Now, let's get back to the show. One, I want to acknowledge how brilliantly you're able to explain that. Two, I want to acknowledge that you're yanking a dark cloud over my heart. So for real. So as a business owner, the first thing that you learn is you cannot fuck around. You cannot drag employees that are underperforming, because the reality is that the organism as a whole will die.
Yes.
And you were talking about we could, 2/3 of the population could be annihilated, but as long as we have the government, the idea of America still exists. But here's the problem. When you calcify the government in the way that you're talking about, by allowing all of this short-term thinking, all of this just wait out your boss, that's insane. This is how empires fall. I want everybody to understand. If you can hear my voice, please understand the following. Every empire in history has so abused the monetary system that they go away. Now, how do you end up abusing the monetary system? You get something like this where people are not being held accountable to the results that they're supposed to deliver. And if you allow an organization to be created where people are just waiting out their bosses, now it really does become a figurehead comes in. They focus entirely on international endeavors because they can actually influence international policy, but they can't really do anything at home. And so you get this, what's happening to America right now, as far as I can tell, is we become effectively the hegemon in waiting at the end of World War I. Some would say we are the hegemon at that point. Certainly by the end of World War II, we are everything. And we've just been trading on that goodwill until now. And now it's breaking down because of largely, not only, but largely because of this layer of concrete in the gears of what could otherwise be a high functioning government. Okay. So
I'm glad that we're part of the dark cloud club.
Yeah.
Because I also have a dark cloud over my heart pretty much all the time.
More.
So I'm sorry to
Don't apologize. I always want to know what's true.
But
all I care about is what's true.
But here's what's important to understand. It doesn't have to be that way, to your point, because there is a tool that the president has called like the presidential authority to make executive orders. An executive order trumps all other previous laws at its penning. And since the days of Obama, we've seen nothing but an increase in the president's willingness to write more executive orders than ever before. So Donald Trump has the precedent already to come in and make more executive orders than Biden made, which were more than the previous Trump made, which were more than the previous Obama made, right? So we have this precedent now for Donald Trump to come in and just sign executive orders. And with the flick of a pen, he can change all the policies. He can change all the status quo. He can absolutely upend everything. I think he will. When he does give the executive orders for a massive cleaning of the federal government, we have to also expect that it will be executed, meaning we will see a huge purge of federal employees. There's no work instructions and SOPs to back up new federal employees. So when we see that big purge, we should expect problems. We should expect upheaval and chaos, and people aren't going to know what they're doing.
On an international stage? Or
on a domestic stage, at least in a government stage. So we should expect things to get worse before they get better. What happens when a company realizes it has problems? It can lay people off, it can fire people, it can change policies. It gets worse before it gets better. The major problem here is that a for-profit company, or the major difference here is that for-profit companies need a profit to survive, or else the company dies. Federal government does not need a profit. It's got a tax base. It's got guaranteed revenue. All it needs is employed people to pay taxes so that it can make revenue. That's why the government's always so focused on employment rates. If you have more unemployment, you have less tax revenue. If you have people who are employed in jobs that are low paying, you have less tax revenue. Unless we start increasing our tax rates, which is how Europe survives, with very high tax rates. So that's the game that the government's trying to play. Fewer employees will reduce the amount of overhead costs, but then if they don't have people who can do the job, they'll have to turn to contractors. Those contractors come at a premium price, and now you basically have the entire administrative government operating the same way that the intelligence services operate, which is they don't have enough staff employees. They augment with contract employees, and that's how your Kakis, your Booz Allens, your Deloittes of the world became billion-dollar companies, because they just started producing government contractors.
It seems to me that we need the system to be broken, because when you look at what we're doing, yes, the government has a guaranteed tax base. However, we're racking up $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. The only way out of that is to spend less. So slash the government employees, slash entitlements, whatever the case is going to be. But look at the 10 biggest things that we spend money on. You're going to be slashing those. It's not going to be at the margins. Or you have to raise GDP. And if we could get people, all of us, anybody, hey, if you're here listening right now, think of the GDP as the revenue generated by the government. It's not, because the government ultimately does not generate revenue, but they can either impede or unimpede the GDP of everybody else that's within its borders. So the whole thesis that Trump is operating under is that I'm going to be able to unlock growth. GDP is going to go up, so I don't have to tax people more and commit suicide like Europe is doing. Hi, Europe. I hope you're okay. I don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
But if you look at the number of companies that are worth more than $1 billion that were started in the last 50 years or something like that, the US has a ton and Europe has like 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. And anybody that thinks corporations are evil, I will just remind you, the government doesn't make money. They take money from the people that make money, and it's the corporations that make money. So if you want your people to be thriving, you've got to have GDP. When the government makes up all the GDP, don't get me started, printing money, debt, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so
there is a third tool
please say more.
to get out of debt.
You're either about to change my life or we're about to be in fisticuffs. What is it?
Fisticuffs might be the way it goes. You can just default. So think about what happens when you look at the national debt that the United States carries, 12 to 15% of that debt is owed to one country, China. And then you have $500 million more that's owed to Russia. And then you have obfuscated numbers that go to the ultra wealthy that are Chinese, are Russian, are Iranian, are Turkish, are Saudi. You could arguably simply not pay those debts, write it off the top line, write off the amount owed, and simultaneously strike an economic blow to your largest adversaries. I'm not altogether unconvinced that that is exactly the strategy that we plan. That when we decide to go to war with East versus West, when we decide to get involved, we're going to do to China what we did to Russia, and we proved that we're willing to do when we sanctioned the actual cash reserves of Russia that was being held in US denominated dollars and European euros. We just took their money. Extrajudicial, not at all allowed. Something that we had NATO sign off on because we control NATO. It was totally illegal in every definition of the word. There's no reason we can't just do that with our national debt. And that's going to reduce us like 25% overnight and defund our enemies from being able to work against us. Will it destroy the US dollar? Arguably, if you're doing it only to your adversaries, maybe not. Maybe that makes your allies even more allied because now you have a massive head start against your enemies. But that is a third way that companies get out of debt. Fisticuffs or?
No, I was like, there's no thing he's going to be able to pull out. You are correct. In terms of being able to change the ratio of debt to GDP, that is the nuclear option because that, there's no guarantees in life. I want to be very clear. I cannot see the future, and it's possible that that works out just fine. It's also possible that 10 years later, we are dropping bombs on each other at a scale never before seen in human history. People do not like it when you fuck with their money.
I agree.
And wowza. Fully concede the point that that is certainly a thing that we can do. Hey, if we want to get crazy, we could also devalue the dollar against gold. And that won't make the world happy either, but that would also have a very big impact on the debt. Okay, the reason that is so dark and I can hear wolves howling in the background is really twofold. One, because it's all too possible that that's on the menu of options. And two, because that is where Ray Dalio has been saying this is all going to go, that we end up in a hot war. And the reason we end up in a hot war is when we lock up China's money and they're in the middle of a crisis, because they are in the middle of a crisis right now. Nothing that the US hasn't seen, and I'm sure they'll be able to inflate their way out of it and all that good stuff. But if the US freezes some ungodly amount of my money and I'm China, I go, oh, really? You want to play? Cool. Taiwan's mine. And now I'm going to see how badly you want these chips in your modern way of life, because you either give me my money back or I'm going in and I'm taking over and I'm cutting off your supply. They are not going to roll over. They are not just going to take it. And this is truly, last time we talked, you said that World War III has already started. That's how World War III goes from what do you mean we're in World War III to downtown LA just got vaporized.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, the truth holds today as it's held for our multiple conversations. The future is not happy. We are years away from happy future. We are potentially months away from positive indicators that happiness is coming, but we're not anywhere close to happy yet. and we won't be close to happy for a long time. China won't roll over. Great point, right? Also, when it comes to actual measurable objective facts about China right now, they have the largest military industrial complex in the world when it comes to counts of troops, numbers of active warships, numbers of aircraft, ammunitions at the ready. They surpass us by
ability to make more
by almost 7 times.
Yeah, they are us when Pearl Harbor happened.
So they're not going to roll over because they look at us and they see that we have our senior advisors to the military advising to stop giving weapons to Ukraine and Israel because we are at such a deficit. We don't even know how we would wage a sustained conflict if we were the active participant. So if China were to invade Taiwan militarily, which there's no indications that that is their intention necessarily, but that is one of their options. If they invade militarily, the US is really only going to be able to augment Taiwanese defense capabilities. We won't be able to wage a war on our own, just based on our manufacturing capability and the amount of ammunition, weapons, troops, tanks, ships that we have already built. Chinese shipbuilding is outproducing us. Chinese military training is outproducing us. China is outspending us. And what did we learn from Russia in Ukraine? The whole world sanctioned Russia. How did they keep their economy alive? Wartime economy. Why are, well, France and Germany are fucked right now on their own. But before they fucked themselves with meltdowns in their parliaments, they were the ones warning that if we don't find a way to bring a ceasefire in Ukraine, Russia is going to continue to build its economy on the back of a war. That's exactly how the United States has survived some of our worst times. We had a wartime economy. That's what made Afghanistan, Iraq worth it. That's what made World War II worth it. That's what made the Korean War worth it. That's what made Vietnam worth it, because economies go up. Domestic production goes up. Employment goes up. Tax bases go up when there's a war. China is preparing mentally and fiscally for some kind of conflict. It doesn't have to be with us. It can be with all of its neighbors in the South China Sea for all it cares. But right now, we literally can't wage war. What are we going to do in the future? They're not going to roll over. And to your exact point, they know we're not going to roll over. So you've got these two big fucking dogs staring at each other, growling but not barking yet. And everybody else is walking around being like, oh, they're fine because there's a mesh fence between them. I don't know what the future holds, but it's not going to be a hard barbed wire fence that makes these two dogs peaceful.
By the time this airs, it will have already happened. But what do you think about Trump inviting Xi Jinping to his inauguration?
I like the idea because, again, you have to acknowledge a big dog. I have a puppy now. We have a 4-month-old poodle, standard poodle puppy. It's got the same hair as me, right? Only white instead of black. But one thing that I've learned in the puppy training classes is that there's nothing more dangerous than a dog on a leash. Because when a dog's on a leash, instinctively it feels like it's confined, trapped. So then when a dog on a leash meets another dog on a leash, they start pulling on the leash, coming at each other. If they didn't have the leashes, their instincts wouldn't force them into conflict. They'd be trying to smell each other's ass, right? Completely different movement. But instead, from the outside observer, you watch these two dogs growling, salivating, pulling at each other as if they would kill each other. It's the leash that's the problem, not the dogs. So essentially what we have in the United States with China is you have these two big dogs that want to acknowledge each other. They want to sniff each other's ass. I think Trump knows that. Let them sniff. And then from there, they can start making moves that are not going to be misinterpreted. Remember how we avoided the Cuban Missile fiasco, right? The crisis avoided nuclear war because there was a bunch of ass sniffing going on, right? People were they had intel on us, we had intel on them, back and forth. We could avoid miscommunications to the point where they even had a phone that they could call each other to make sure that there was no miscommunication. The world is full of miscommunication right now. Things are unexpected. Things are happening that analysts didn't anticipate. Assessments are wrong about what is happening. Nobody can guess what the next step is. Who would have guessed that Assad would have fallen in 14 days, backed by Turkey, and that now those Turkish-backed groups would be fighting American-backed Kurds inside Syria? Who would have guessed that was going to happen 2.5 weeks ago? Like, there's only 4 people in the entire United States that watch fucking Syria, right? So I think Trump's plan to invite Xi to include him in more and more things in the United States is wise. But he also has to account for the fact that anything he shows or tells Xi is going to make its way to Putin and make its way to Kim Jong-un and make its way to all of the enemies of the United States, because that's how Xi maintains his leverage over the growing axis of resistance, because they're a big dog and they're invited to sniff the other dog's ass.
Okay, so if we've got Trump coming in and he's got a cadre of people that are, for the reasons that you laid out, they're not going to surface the truth. I'm going to pose a way around that. Tell me if you think this is crazy. So the way that you laid out the problem seems fundamentally true because it is in keeping with what I know about the human animal. Given the state of AI, what I would do is say, I want my analyst, I want the human touch, I want to see what's going on there, but I also want the people, the field agents, to be able to feed their briefs into an AI that's going to summarize and hand it to me. I will verify the bias of the AI by asking it to take both sides of arguments that I know the answer to and see if it's really giving me something that's just bias on bias, or if it's able to take both sides, so that now I can compare and contrast. This is what the AI says is going based on field data being reported to it. And then this is what the people are telling me, and I would compare and contrast. That plus whether I have to do it as an executive order, which I'm actually not a big fan of, but if I have to be able to do an executive order to be able to hire and fire people based on performance, then executive order I would highly recommend. Those two things. I can hold government employees accountable to results, and I have an AI to gut check what I'm getting from the field. Do you see another way to do that better?
I don't think I see a way to do that better, but there are some elements there that I want to make sure in keeping true to our dark cloud, right? Performance metrics, the day they're implemented would be the first day that you'd be able to actually measure performance for a government employee. They don't have metrics right now. It's kind of standard practice across the government. They don't have performance metrics.
Elon, David Sachs, Trump, like they're going to be able to come up with metrics.
I agree. They can. I'm just saying that when they come up with them, that would be day one. So from now until the day those are rolled out and issued is all before day one, right? And then to your point about performance, the performance process for government employees, even military employees, the performance process is flawed. Everybody is overstated in their performance report. So basically, your bad employee is an employee who meets expectations formally on paper. And your standout employees are the ones that exceed expectations and have all sorts of accolades. And then the people who you're trying to flag for promotion are the people who exceed expectations, have all kinds of accolades, and have certain keywords inside their resume that also highlight to the board that's reviewing them for promotion, this is somebody that their boss really wants them to promote. So it's already hyperinflated. You don't have anybody that you can easily cut, because if you actually look at everybody's performance review, they're all 10 out of 10.
Yeah, that's not how you cut though, man. So and it'll be interesting because I know you're growing like a weed at Everyday Spy. I'm going to look into your future and I'm going to tell you it's going to go like this. There are going to be people that in your heart of hearts, you realize you're caring because you like them as people, but they don't deliver results and that you're making excuses for them. And if they blindly submitted a project that you'd be like, oh, whoever project this is, kill it. And then only to find out that it's somebody that you really like. And so ultimately, as you scale, you will hit a point where you can't oversee everything. And suddenly you'll be pulled away from your wife and kids because you have to go deal with the fire. And as you're looking at it, you're like, I should never have been pulled into this. You will say, who's responsible for this? And a name will come up and you'll be like, cool. That person is not useful to this organization. You will very rapidly begin to recognize those patterns. I've lived it. I'm a few years in your future.
You're not even that. I mean, I've already started struggling with what you're saying.
Yeah,
you're totally right.
It will make itself apparent over time. Right now, Trump has around him the greatest living entrepreneurs. It is insane what he's been able to bring around him. Now, I get it. There are complications to the government that's going to make this very difficult, and it is not going to be some like Pollyanna outcome. However, Elon walked into Twitter and was just like Pareto principle, 80-20, I'm going to get rid of 80% of the people and hope that I got the 20% right. Obviously, you'll look at metrics, but it won't be the employee reviews.
Yeah.
It's going to be things like, it'll be different for every department. I want to be very clear.
Yep.
But he went and was just like, how many lines of code did you submit? Okay, so first thing is there's a line in Elon's mind knowing from an engineering standpoint how many lines roughly of code you should be submitting. I'm just going to lop off anybody that doesn't submit that amount of code. And will I have lost some like really high level guys that just don't do a lot? Yeah, I don't give a fuck. Like they're just, you have to have a line. Then I can bring people back if I have to. And I remember openly on X, he was like, hey, Timmy or whatever, we fired you. We actually want to bring you back if you would reach out. So that's his thing. Seeing what Milei's doing in Argentina, same thing, weed whack. And then if you overdo it, you can bring some people back in. But he's managed to, I think, build a surplus. Like it's actually working. Yeah. So I have a lot of high hopes for that. Again, not existing in a Pollyanna land. But if you were to make a prognostication about where all of this goes, do you think it is just, it's too gridlocked, they're never going to be able to make progress, these guys are just going to heads down, wait them out?
I think so. I still owe you a second answer and this answer, right? So I think that the existing government establishment is going to try first, heads down, wait out our leadership. Let's also be honest. Donald Trump has a history of loving people this year and hating them next year.
Loving them this morning and hating them this afternoon. Yes.
So
that's my big fear.
But that feeds into the existing government culture of we just wait out the boss.
This guy's going to self-destruct.
Just wait out the boss. And even if they don't have to wait out Donald Trump, they can wait out Elon Musk. They can wait out whoever Musk hired. They can wait out whoever's implementing the policy of the person that Elon hired. Like they can wait and wait and wait and wait. And that's all they know. Right? Even your high performing government person, even the person who's listening now who knows that they work their ass off in the federal government and they've never been rewarded for it because that's the way it works. Even that person knows on some level, I could just color and wait. Like I can just do that.
It's so dark.
It's their
true.
Survival mechanism.
Yeah.
So that will be the first instinct. I think that instinct can be buffered out, right? To your exact point. Do I see a future with AI? Absolutely, I see a future with AI. There are risks inherent with that future. AI is still code. Code can be hacked in by an adversary. AI is still based on the inputs, and who knows what the inputs are going to be. There's all sorts of challenges there, but you can't turn away from the future just because there's challenges. Of course, there's challenges. You have to go in knowing those challenges. I love that you brought out Argentina. It's a perfect, timely, relevant example. This chaotic leader came in with plans to completely upend everything that was established. And for a year, he struggled to keep people believing. And then after a year, that's still not good, but it's better.
By a lot.
By a lot. And a lot better than what it was isn't saying much to most democracies, but it's a shit ton better. Simultaneous and in parallel to that, you had France dissolve parliament and then re-vote to bring in new leadership. And then you had the resignation of the prime minister that resulted in a no confidence vote of the parliament. So France is back to no leadership again. Germany just had a no confidence vote in its parliament and its current, is it a prime minister in Germany? Whatever the hell.
Chancellor?
Olaf, the chancellor, thank you. Like 2 days ago, he was voted in no confidence vote in parliament. So they're melted down. The top two largest economies in Europe, the two bastions of democracy in Europe, the two largest partners to the United States and NATO, arguably with UK, they don't have a government right now. They're melted down. They have to go back to the drawing board and re-elect because the people couldn't pick the right leadership more than one time in a row. So you got Milei saying, burn it all down, build it back up. You've got the old world trying to keep the old way and burning down on their own. And now we've got this question of Donald Trump and people wondering, is he just going to destroy America? I think he's got a plan to burn it down, build it back up, because he's done that. And like you said, he's creating this ensemble of entrepreneurs who have all in their careers had to burn it down and build it back up. The building it back up is not a guarantee. It takes a whole lot more work than burning it down. But sometimes you got to burn the cornfield to reset the soil to grow something better.
Do you think he's going to destabilize America?
Destabilize is a tough word, right? I would argue that he has stabilized the United States on fewer feet. If you consider a table has 4 legs, does it need 4 legs? There are plenty of tables that have 3 legs, and there are other tables that have 6 legs. So did he destabilize the United States, or he just reduce the number of legs? I get the impression that the people who support him and see what he sees are more stable than ever. The people who don't understand him and don't see what he sees are more unraveled than ever.
Do you think he's going to destabilize the international order? And I'll give you an example. Dear Hamas, if you don't hand back the hostages by the time I take office, all hell will break loose. Now, he might be able to find a way to dance around saying that. He might be able to find a way to dance around saying, I'll end the Russia-Ukrainian conflict before my first day in office. But he's making a lot of bold statements. And if he keeps making those claims and doesn't back them up, he's going to have a domestic problem massively. And so I have a feeling he either has to deliver results or deliver big action in the form of delivered aggression. And if he gets results because everybody's scared, great. It'll be a big win. If they're all like, nah, I'm going to wait this fool out, he's going to implode. And then he's forced to do something that is direct American military intervention that destabilizes things.
There's 2 answers, I think, to your question. So I think he will stabilize the world around American hegemony again.
So strong man,
strong leader. Unfortunately, that's what's working in the world right now. Strong man, strong leader. What's Israel, right? Netanyahu. People don't like what he's doing. Strong man, strong leader. Xi Jinping, Putin, even Al-Jalani right now. Strong man, strong leader. Fucking Erdogan, 20 years in power in Turkey, a secular democracy. Like, strong men, strong power centers are in fashion and effective right now. That's why Biden didn't have very much success. Not strong man, strong leader, strong orator, strong anything, right? It's why Kamala Harris didn't stand a chance from the moment that she was nominated. She's not strong. She couldn't even retain her own staff. How is she going to retain the momentum of a people behind her? So my point with all that is to say Donald Trump fits the mold of what stabilizes right now. But that stabilizing doesn't mean conflict-free. It usually means more conflict to stabilize your corner of the sandbox, if you will. But the second side to that is that geopolitics is not like domestic politics. You can make big promises in geopolitics that never come true, and the world forgets and forgives. Domestic politics, when you make big promises, people expect you to deliver, because domestic shit affects us every single day. Your paycheck, the price of bread, whether your children are safe in school, that stuff bothers you every day. What the fuck happens in Ukraine? What the fuck happens with national debt? What the fuck happens with Hezbollah, Hamas, or what's HTS? So he can make all the promises he wants abroad, and the United States won't really, we won't flex on him for that. We've seen that. Do you remember Zelensky's first promises with the Ukraine war? That Ukraine will not quit until the original borders before the annexation of Crimea were returned to their custody. He's thinking about quitting now. What did Netanyahu say about Hamas? We will not quit until Hamas is eradicated. Hamas isn't eradicated. He's thinking about quitting, right? He's already looking at Yemen. What's he going to make? These guys make huge promises, and they make promises that are existential, and the world forgets about it, right? They'll move on. So Trump knows geopolitics is a lot like marketing. You can say you have the best cup of coffee in the world, but when your coffee is just it's okay because you still made the revenue off the coffee, and people will like your cake or your pie or your eggs instead, and they'll keep coming back. That's how geopolitics works.
That's so interesting because it is exactly like marketing. If you want to rally people, you've got to give them something big and exciting. When I was 60 pounds heavier than I am now, I didn't say to myself, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. I said, I'm going to have 6-pack abs. And focusing on six-pack abs, that was motivating. That was motivating enough to endure 2 years of effectively rabbit starvation.
I can't imagine you with that much extra weight,
dude. Yeah. Oh, I've got the photos. And it was an example of the study that they've done that shows that that's just true. People need the big things. So if I'm Trump, if I'm Netanyahu, it's all going to be the biggest, the best, number one, all the way, total eradication, because that is a big enough goal to get everybody excited. Right. Now, once you get into the reality of there's a lot of people dying, then now the mood shifts. You got what you needed out of the big bombastic promise, and now we get into something that's more realistic. But there is something about, maybe you're right. Maybe it'll just be everybody forgets all the things that Trump said internationally. And as long as he closes the border and people's wages go up, they'll be like, yeah, I don't care.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I mean, to a certain extent, I think Trump is successful because he understands marketing so well. Yeah. The man has made a fortune putting his name on buildings. You've got to know a thing or two about how to make people find value in you when all you have to do is put your name on their building and they're willing to license it from you, right? That's power. That's truly understanding the American zeitgeist. I think Trump understands that. And I think that's why people like to call him a populist leader. We've only had populist leaders for like the last 15 years. We are electing the most popular person. Barack Obama's Hope campaign was nothing but fucking populism, right? That's all. Biden wouldn't have been elected if not for Trump. If not for Obama saying, I'll never forget this. He's a lifetime American servant, and he's going to leave a proud legacy for the American people upon this presidency. And instead, look at the actual legacy this guy has left. Yes, he's been a lifetime public servant. That's not how the history is going to remember this guy. Right?
How's he going to be remembered?
He's going to be remembered as the guy who destroyed our economy with COVID. He's going to be remembered as the guy who pardoned his son. He's going to be remembered as the guy who tripped and fell on stage and people doubted his mental capabilities. He's going to be remembered as the person who nominated a vice president that America had denied multiple times before to run for office. That's how he's going to be remembered. And I feel bad for Joe Biden because that sucks. The dude's had enough hardship in his life. He doesn't also need to have his legacy questioned forever, but it will. It will, because at the end of the day, Biden and Obama and the Democratic people continue to put faith in the National Democratic Convention rather than what they know the people of America want. And that's the big difference that's happened. Since the introduction of Donald Trump into the political cycle, he understands what the people want. He doesn't care what the convention wants, right? There's huge amounts of Republicans that don't support him. Remember when he first ran? He first ran kind of on an independent platform until he could be absorbed into the Republican platform so that he had the written rule of having either Democratic or Republican support. And then even when he's in office, Republicans work against him. The guy's constantly being ousted and threatened by his own party. So he definitely doesn't have the party support. Inside the liberal part of the world, they don't do anything without the full party support. They're separate. They don't speak the voice of the American people. They speak the voice of the party. And then the people who believe in the party's definition of democracy believe that the party is their best interest. Like, that's whether the party creates the popular idea or whether the individual creates the popular idea. In both cases, it's populism. You're just promoting what's popular, and that's what people are voting on.
It's interesting. The Democratic Party does not feel like a populist party to me. When they shot down Bernie Sanders, Bernie was the populist wing of the left-wing ideology, and they took the exact opposite approach. This whole idea of the elites, man, I am absolutely fascinated by the elites. So I wasn't aware of how the sort of quote unquote world worked for a very long time because I was so successful at building businesses. And it's only recently when my business became understanding how the world works that I'm like, okay, wait a second, piecing this all together. It is shocking to me the anti-democratic way that the Democratic, ironically, Party puts their candidates together, leverages this concept of the elite to cram it down people's throats. Do you know a guy named Martin Gurry?
No. Also
ex-CIA guy. I had him on the show recently. His episode wasn't that popular. It's a great fucking episode, but he is, he's somebody that looks at the global communication. And he said, he basically predicted Trump because he was watching what was going on with social media, and he realized, oh, once everybody is the media, the whole idea of the elites falls away. You're no longer able to control the narrative, and that's not a good thing. And that once narrative is just coming from everywhere, people are not going to be able to make sense of the world. So we need a new elite to step forward to be worthy of being followed. And it's like, I kind of track what he's saying, but the whole idea of, it's what I call the dumb voter problem. Let's see if I can continue to trigger people by refusing to change my language around this. The reason I call it that is I want to know. So I'm perfectly willing to accept that I'm somebody else's dumb voter. I get that. I just want to know, when you think of a group as being a dumb voter, how do you think they should be treated? So the way I believe you should handle dumb voters, again, I understand I am someone else's dumb voter. But the way I believe, the people I look at and say, this person is just objectively dumb. Like they can't process raw data. We all think that of someone somewhere. I'm not passing a moral judgment. I'm not saying dumb people are bad people. I'm saying there's some people that cannot navigate the world well. Despite that, I believe that because no one should be trusted to draw that line, least of all me, that we should be saying, hey, they're a citizen. They are a full citizen with rights, and you're just going to have to deal with whatever comes from everyone getting to vote. The elites take a totally different stance. And their thing is, some people are too dumb to think through this, and I'm not willing to live in a world where the quality of the decision-making is degraded by dumb people. That scares the life out of me. And so if we could live in a world where there was a group of people that I could trust to be perfectly moral and blah, 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 sure, but I can't. And so I would much rather have where every idea that doesn't violate current American free speech laws are allowed to be heard. And don't try to silence people. Don't try to cram a candidate down our throat, which is what the Democratic Party did. I would rather be, if we're in a populist mood, then I would rather have a populist leader. Now, does that mean that that can't go dark? No, of course it can, but I don't believe in preemptive strikes. I am not a precog. I cannot read Donald Trump's mind. So I don't want to see people try to break the democratic process. Anyway, that was a lot of words around. I don't think the Democrats have been populist for quite a while.
It's funny because I would say that you are correct when it comes to, if you look at populism being something that is actually effective, right? For all people. Where I would differ from you is if you say what's important to Democrats, what's important to the Democratic National Convention, the DNC, what's important to them, what's popular to them, that's what they try to promote. If you remember, Bernie Sanders was shot down.
But that's popular to a really small group of people that think they know better.
And think that they're bigger than they really are.
Yes.
If you think about what happened when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton was who they supported when they shot down Bernie Sanders. And all that came out in open source, right? That even the DNC had emails talking about how they were going to silence the Sanders campaign and drive that support to the Clinton campaign. Why? Because they wanted a Clinton, they wanted a female, they wanted all of that Democratic Party value stuff, because that was trendy and relevant and interesting to their party at the time. Well, what was Kamala Harris? The same thing. She was a mixed race female with no kids of her own. That's trendy and popular in their group, in their in-group bias. That's what they thought all of America wanted. That was exactly their flaw. That wasn't what all of America wanted.
Can I take umbrage with that?
But absolutely, man.
I don't think it's what they thought all of America wanted. I think it's what they thought all of America needed.
Fair.
And they are dumb voters.
Fair.
And we are going to decide for them, because I do not want my ability to make good decisions to be watered down by dumb people. This is why I have one question for anybody who wants to be a quote unquote elite. What do you do with dumb voters?
Yeah.
And the way that they answer that question, if they want to relegate them in any way, if they want to silence them or ice them out, I'm like, dude, this is how you become a totalitarian state. Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they know what's better. And I'm just like, God damn, will you people please stop trusting yourselves?
Yeah.
Like, this is my message to entrepreneurs. This is my message to parents. This is my message to certainly people in the government. Stop trusting yourself so much. Please understand. Here's how I want people to think about me. because I'm going to say what I believe to be true as aggressively as I believe it. So if I really believe something, I'm going to say it with all the aggression in the world. I'm not going to hedge my bets because I am trusting them to go, I'm going to take the read of a whole bunch of people who are giving me their very narrow, wildly distorted lens on what they see. And the analogy that I use is the truth, capital T, capital T, capital the, capital truth, is when you are trying to figure out what it is because it is effectively unknown. We don't even know the laws of physics. So when I reach inside of this black bag that has an object inside of it that is the truth, and I'm wearing fucking mittens, which is what life is like, and I'm trying to feel what this thing is, I have a guess, and then I want a whole bunch of other people to go in and be like, no, I don't think it's that, I think it's this, and another, and another, and another. Because I do not believe that I am some sort of magical person who can reach inside with the mittens in the black bag and figure out exactly what it is so that I want everyone to listen to me, not even in my own company. Nobody can see that. I mean, Jesus, maybe Elon Musk. But if I had to guess, even he is simply surrounding himself with a whole lot of, in fact, here's what I think is really going on with Elon Musk. As a leader, you will only be able to attract people who look at you and go, ooh, I'll round it to smart. It's not always that. But people are not going to go to work for somebody that they think is dumber than they are. So you're only going to be able to staff up with people that look at you and go, ooh, you're a little bit smarter than me. And because Elon is so freakishly smart and effective, he can get a whole group of freakishly smart people to work for him. So even he is going, I need other really, really smart people to poke at this problem and to say what the issue is. And I think when I look out at political issues, the problem is people trust themselves too damn much.
That is a cognitive bias that's known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. When you overstate your capabilities internally, and you're in fact less capable than you really are, that is an example of the cognitive bias called Dunning-Kruger. And you're exactly right. We see it, everybody's prone to it, but with the entrenchment of the DNC, the liberals have become very, very vulnerable to their own confidence. Just like you were saying, they thought the world needed a mixed race female president. They didn't even think, is the world ready for this? They didn't think, is this candidate the right candidate? We've had this conversation, countless times personally and publicly. I'm a huge fan of women in a million ways. I think women are brilliant. I think women are smart. I think women are physically gifted. Can be, just like men can be, right? Yeah. So I'm all for the understanding and believing the equality between men and women. But that makes it all the more important to me that when we have a female president, she isn't given any freebies on the way to the top.
She's a gangster.
She's got to be thug, man. She's got to be just as thug as any American person who gets to the top of the food chain. When they ride on mom and dad's coat heels or the last name or some sort of party bias, will I accept it? Sure, I'll accept it, but it doesn't get me pumped. It doesn't get me excited, right? I want our first female president to be somebody that gets the whole world excited, right? Somebody who pulled themselves up from bootstraps. But all of that to say that your point over and over again today, and I love it, is human behavior, because human behavior is predictable. If you understand human behavior better than the humanist sitting across the table from you, you will predict what they do before they do it. And they for damn sure aren't going to be able to predict what you're doing because they're not as prepared as you are for human prediction. When it comes to human behavior, CIA has a rule of thumb that they teach us very early in our experience at the farm. Be the dumbest person in the room. And you've brought up dumb voters and you brought up dumb people. And I think this is so valuable because it fits exactly why we're taught that idea of being the dumbest person in the room. When you are smart, but you act dumb. I don't mean you walk in and say stupid things trying to make people believe you're dumb. When you're just quiet, people will assume through human behavior that you either have nothing to say or have nothing intelligent to say. They will not assume that you have something intelligent that you're just holding on to. So they will then start to assume that you are the dumbest person in the room. You must be dumb because you're not participating. You must be dumb because you're not saying anything enlightening. You must be dumb because you're just sitting there with a blank stare on your face. That's how you immediately turn yourself into a non-threat in any situation, just through silence. And then by pretending to be the dumbest person in the room, you actually become even more informed because guess what everybody else is doing? Talking. They're all talking, trying to prove that they're the smartest person in the room. So it turns you into this core collector, collecting information, biases, points of view, perspectives, arguments, counter-arguments from everybody. And no one's asking you anything. Nobody's assessing you to be threatening in any way, shape, or form. And the beautiful part is you can walk into that room quiet. You can walk out of that room quiet. And you've sucked up the sum total of information that was in that room, and you're carrying it to the next room where they assume that you're dumb again. And you can keep looking dumb, sucking up information that you can use for your own distinct competitive advantage anytime, any place on your choosing. You're no longer subject to when opportunity strikes. You can literally create the opportunity on your own. So there's a strategic, cognitive, demonstrable advantage to appearing dumb. And what you're saying is that there are people out there, particularly in the Democratic Party, who are looking at people who are quiet and just assuming they're dumb, when in fact those people could very well be exercising one of the most powerful advantages in the elicitation and intelligence world.
It's a really powerful idea. It's not what I'm saying. So when but really, and I don't want to diminish what you just said, because it's such a powerful tool to have in your quiver. What I am saying is the world has dumb people.
That is fair. Objectively fair.
Objectively. You reveal yourself when you explain to me how you want to treat dumb people. And everybody's line of what is dumb is different, right? So the reality is, if someone can solve better problems than you, they can think through things faster, et cetera, the whole world's going to say, yeah, they're smarter and cool. So if they're the line of what is smart and what is not smart, then I fall into the category of dumb. What I'm getting at, and I've seen this in podcasting, you find yourself colliding with people that you're like, whoa, that's your take on this issue. And when I tried to map, okay, this is somebody really smart, this is somebody that I really respect, but the way that they want to handle the world, it happened with free speech. When I saw during COVID that people wanted other people to shut up because they were spreading misinformation, I was like, holy fuck, you actually think you have, that you understand things so well that you're prepared to lie to other people because you think the outcome of your lie is better than them groping for the truth? I was like, what the fuck? Like that is, to me, that is such a psychotically self-destructive way to approach the world. You blind yourself intentionally because you're saying, I don't want to hear from these people. I don't want other people to debate ideas. Jordan Peterson has this right. The whole idea of running thought experiments is so that you can think through a highly risky idea without having to live it, because in living that highly risky idea, you may literally die. And so running a simulation in your mind of what happens when you do XYZ thing, that act, that thinking is what that is. Now you can iterate very, very quickly. And I'm saying, okay, well, thinking is super powerful, but it's even more powerful. Let everybody else treat them like a bunch of AI, that they all have a simulation inside of their minds that's very unique to mine. They're going to run all these simulations and they're going to tell me what they think is the right idea. And the vast majority of them will sound stupid. The vast majority of them will be terrible ideas, as the vast majority of my ideas will be terrible. But I want everybody to put their ideas out, and I'm willing to accept that in battling those ideas, there's going to be a ton of confusion, but ultimately, the ideas that survive will allow us to go forward a lot faster than saying, okay, I want to siphon off 1% of the population and say, you guys think through everything for us.
So there was this pastor that I had when I lived in Florida very shortly after I left CIA, 2014. And he was a young pastor seeding a new church. And he used to have this saying, and his saying was, let me tell you my bad idea. Like that was his saying. Let me tell you my bad idea. He was young enough to understand that he was never going to make a living for himself and his 2 kids and his wife off of a pastor's salary, that he had to find a way to have some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor as well, writing books, public speaking, something, right? So we used to always have these back and forth dialogues about entrepreneurialism and business ideas and book ideas and study ideas, right? So he would constantly say, let me tell you my bad idea, because he believed that no good idea can happen unless it starts from a bad idea first. And you have to be able to say your bad idea to a group of people who can help you hone your bad idea, cut out the bad parts, and find that core good idea that's inside that you can't see for yourself, because it's like a seed wrapped around like a nut, and all the meat of the nut is bad idea, but the seed is a good idea. And it wasn't until talking to him at 34 years old, I was 34 years old, outside of CIA, that I finally started to understand what we had always heard in government, which was there are no bad ideas. That became cliche, right? There are no stupid questions, there are no bad ideas. I never understood what that meant until sitting on this small table with this pastor who was like, let me tell you my bad idea, and just calling it bad from the start. And I've picked that up on my own. I do that with my company now. I do that with my clients now. Let me tell you my bad idea so that you already know that I'm not in love with this idea. I'm just throwing it out there to see if we can all work together to find the seed, the kernel inside it that's good.
Totally agree. If I could get people to adopt that, their lives would be a lot better. Going back to human nature, help me understand Syria. What's going on? Knowing that we know humans, what can we predict is going to happen there?
Syria is not an easy topic for anybody. So the first thing to understand about Syria is that it is one of the most complex civil war conflicts that we've seen in modern history. It actually goes back to before Arab Spring in 2011. So Bashar al-Assad is the son of the Assad who created the Syrian despot as we know it, the Syrian rule of the Assad family. And Bashar's father, I forget his name now, it starts with an H. Bashar's father participated in 3 different coups before he became the leader of Syria. So he supported a coup when he was commander of the Air Force that brought in a new, essentially, dictator. And then he participated in a second coup that brought in a different dictator when he was the head of the armed forces. And then he orchestrated a coup himself before he became the leader of Syria. So he basically helped a coup when he was 30, helped a coup when he was 40, helped a coup when he was 50, and the 50-year-old. Then what he knew, he was an expert in how to create a coup, which is how he kept coups from happening for the rest of his rule. Bashar, his son, was actually his third choice to become the new ruler of Syria. First, he wanted a cousin to become the new ruler because he was a strong enough man. The cousin died. Then he wanted his eldest son to become the ruler of Syria, and then that son died. So then all that was left was his youngest son, Bashar, who was actually studying medicine in the United Kingdom at the time. And he was like, hey, guess what, buddy? You're going to be the new strongman ruler of Syria. So Bashar al-Assad was doomed from the start. Like, the dude was living the life of the youngest son of a dictator. That's the last thing he thought he was going to ever have to do was be a dictator. So he comes into power circa 2001, 2002. For 10 years, he cozies up with Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, and helps create a thriving secular government in Syria, thriving compared to his father, with tons of trade with Turkey. And a lot of that trade was something that Erdogan wanted because Erdogan was also trying to prove the power of his rule. So increased exports to Syria, increased imports from Syria. Syrian people were happy, Turkish people were happy. Then comes Arab Spring. Syrian people were not happy. Syrian people had some relative stability economically in a minority-controlled government. So let's be very clear. Syria has not been happy for like 70 years, if even before that. Ottoman Empire is probably the last time Syria was happy. But when Arab Spring broke out, Arab Spring was really about minority groups wanting strong men out of government. Erdogan went to Assad and said, you should support the Sunni minority that wants change in Syria, because the the Sunni majority that wants the Alawite minority to be out of power in Syria. That's what Erdogan wanted from Assad. Assad chose a different path. He was like, no, we're going to make sure the Alawites stay in power. We're going to get strongman tactics. We're going to force Arab Spring out of Syria. What people forget about the Arab Spring is that a handful of countries were able to squash the Arab rebellions and do it very successfully, right? Bahrain was able to squash the rebellions very, very quickly and go on to economic success. Libya, Egypt, Yemen, they failed to squash it. Syria failed to squash it, and that turned into years of conflict, which has turned into more than a decade now of destruction for almost all of those countries. The new governments haven't taken over. They haven't been strong. Democracy hasn't quite taken hold. It's been a mess. So Syria is coming off of essentially 15, 13 years of civil war, 20 years of relative stability before that, and 30 years of dictatorship, and 50 years before that of constant change of power through coups. They're all messed up. And inside of all of that mess, you have different rebel groups, you have different factions, you have ISIS in there, you have other Sunni Islamic influence in there, you have Iranian Shiite influence in there. It is a completely complicated, terrible mess in a country that has no real natural resources. The whole reason people are invested in Syria is either to get their goods sold in Syria or to move through Syria to deliver goods to other places, like because Syria touches Turkey and Jordan and Iraq. So you've got all this stuff in there that makes Syria useful, but not important. And that's really what's happening. So even now, if you look at Syria as we have this conversation, you have this group, HTS, that rapidly took power from their base in northwestern Syria. They've been entrenched in northwest Syria, supported by the Turks, protected from Assad because of the relationship that Erdogan and Assad had, the agreement they had. So they've been growing power in there. And they've been de-radicalizing, arguably, because they've been working with Turkey, which is a secular country that has Islam as their core religion, right? So it does make sense that HTS is de-radicalizing. However, their roots are in radical Islam, ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They were supported by the Turks, which is how they moved so quickly to Damascus. So the Turkish got them all the way to Damascus. They have become the default government, not because they're the largest group, but because they're in Damascus. And generally speaking, through the lens of conflict, when you control a capital city, you are the government. Same thing that has the Houthis in Sana'a and Yemen. But by land size, the Americans and the Kurds actually control more space within Syria. They have the whole eastern part of Syria in their control. And then you've got al-Jalawi and his group that have the eastern portion, right, to Damascus, from Damascus all the way up to I think it's Ibdil. And then you've got the Golan Heights where Israel is. That's actually most threatened, most in control by a completely different rebel faction that cooperated with HTS, but is independent from HTS. Just like you have rebel factions all across Syria. So there's probably a third of Syria that has nobody in control, a third of Syria that has the US and the Kurds in control, and then a third of Syria that's controlled by HTS, backed by Turkey. Why does it look like that? It looks like that because Turkey wants Syria to be back in their sphere of influence. And Erdogan is an expert at making sure that he knows how to play the US against Russia and still be a major player in NATO. So Erdogan has his own power intentions. If you understand Turkey, you understand Syria better.
Now, what is America's endgame? What do we want to get out of this?
The United States wants a few things. So first, we don't want the rise of ISIS. Again, we don't want a second rise of ISIS, which is funny because at the end of Trump's first term, he said ISIS is dead, and ISIS is clearly not dead. The other thing that the United States wants is they want a strong ally in the Kurds to continue to help them from Iraq through Syria, because it's a strategic benefit. So that's the main goal of the United States, is to make sure that they have strategic interests in the Middle East, in the non-Khaliji part of the Middle East. Khaliji is all the oil-rich countries. Non-Khaliji is the Middle East that doesn't have oil. That's Jordan and Syria, etc. So the United States has a strategic interest in having a hopping off point and a material transport point that helps them get all over the world. Turkey has a similar interest. They want the same thing. Turkey is actually the country with the fourth most overseas bases. Nobody thinks about that. United States, the United Kingdom, everybody knows they have lots and lots of overseas military bases. Turkey has the fourth most in terms of total count. Turkey's a major military player, but they don't have a major nexus of influence like the United States or the United Kingdom. And that's what Erdogan wants. And then, of course, Iran wants to have access to Lebanon. Iran wants to have access to Shiites. The Kurds just want to have their own land. They've been promised their own land for a long time. The only reason that Kurdistan doesn't exist is because when they were carving up the Ottoman Empire, the powers that be said they would make Kurdistan and then didn't. So maps just didn't include it. So there's a huge ethnic group that has no home, that has become partners with the United States several times and been backstabbed by the United States several times. So that's all of this is happening in Syria. And again, to your point earlier, we don't really care because we don't have a large economic stake. We don't have a huge geological stake. We don't have a huge geographical stake. We have Jordan. We have Turkey. They're on two sides. We have Iraq. Like, why do we care so much about Syria? And the truth is we don't care that much about Syria, but Russia does. And Iran does.
Now, last thing I heard, Trump said, let it be, let it play out. Do you think that's wise?
I actually don't disagree with him on this. I think letting Syria play out is wise for multiple reasons. First, we are already depleted in munitions. So why are we fighting? Why are we dropping bombs and flying planes over Syria when all we're really doing to fight ISIS is destroying infrastructure that HTS could potentially use to create a government that works? Turkey could potentially use to create a government that works, unless we actually believe there's a credible threat from ISIS. Otherwise, we sound like Netanyahu. We're going to completely eradicate Hamas, and then they don't. We're going to completely eradicate Hezbollah, and then they don't. We're kind of saying the same thing. We're going to completely eradicate ISIS, but then we don't. That just sounds like a big promise for no real gain, right? So I like Trump's idea of let Syria sit, because by letting Syria sit, he technically makes better friends with Turkey. And Turkey has major American infrastructure there, has multiple American bases there, and doesn't host any Russian troops. So being on a level playing field, or a more level playing field with Turkey, is far more valuable than being a power broker in Syria.
Okay. What do you think about the idea of America as world's cop? So when Trump talks about America first, a lot of people get up in arms. We need a world policeman to keep the order, policing the seas, being there for all of our allies. How does it play out? Is America first going to be a winner or a loser?
I think America first can be a winner, for sure. I don't know that America police can be a winner. This goes all the way back to what was that hilarious puppet movie when we were
Team America?
Yes,
I haven't seen it, but
it is so apropos, right? Like, because the Team America basically has the America police, whatever they're called, and it's this police force that goes around the world trying to enforce the law. There is no law in the world. The only law is the law of survival. The only law is the law of power. There is no real law. And if you're constantly trying to enforce the law of power, you're constantly exerting your power. Well, when you exert your power, yes, everybody sees that you're powerful, but it also is the same concept as the dumbest person in the room. Everybody knows your power and you don't know anybody else's. And that's what China exploited during the 20-year global war on terror.
Yes, they did.
And now look at us. Now we're waking up to the fact that they have power. Now we're waking up to the fact that they are a threat. Are they as well trained and experienced as our troops? No, nobody's saying that they are. But can they pour more people into a conflict? Kind of like Russia's pouring more people into a conflict in Ukraine? Fuck yes, they can. And their primary objective is an objective that politically we already say is theirs. The one China policy. We already say Taiwan is theirs. So what the fuck are we going to do if they actually move? So we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot using our own best practices against us because we've been distracted by something else. We've been distracted by being the world police. What I love about Trump's ideas are he's like, let's make ourselves economically powerful, flip that economic power into military power and diplomatic power, instead of trying to pretend that the world cares about diplomacy. Because the world doesn't care about diplomacy. The world cares about economics. They care about food and water and shelter, and they care about money, and they care about transaction. Strong men become strong men because they want more power. They get that power by having money. That's how the fucking Assad family has $2 billion in hidden assets. That's why Putin wants to protect Assad, because there's money there. There's billions of dollars there, and guess what they just lost? Hundreds of millions of dollars in some freeze that was not legal. So what kind of American police force supports illegal activity? That's corrupt police. So I like the idea of America first because the world needs America. The world needs the United States. As flawed as we are still a whole lot more honest and straightforward and predictable than other governments.
But in what way do they need us if we're not going to play the role of policemen? So they need our economy, sure.
Does it really matter to us how else they need us?
Yes, in the sense that when I hear you say that they need us, I hear they need us to police the world. Do you mean something else?
No, they don't. I think the world has gotten worse because we've policed it.
It's gotten worse because there is only one policeman? Or...
Sort of. So think about this, right? NATO is a combination of North Atlantic governments, countries, right? We're the strongest member of NATO by design. We set it up that way. So NATO is dependent on us. That's great economically. We can sell our weapons. We can sell our ideals. We can leverage them for pressure in all sorts of different ways, right? But who's our strongest friend? Somebody that we've kept weak. We don't have strong allies. Like, we may have allies that believe in us strongly, but they're not that strong themselves. Where China independently has become strong. Russia independently has gotten to its own level, right? Iran has gotten to its own level. They've been significantly weakened by Israel, which now also allows them to see the strength of Israel, while Israel doesn't fully understand their own strength, right? So we see this playing out around the world. The problem is that we don't have anybody strong in our corner. We're the biggest kid in the backyard. So if 3 medium-sized kids stand up to the biggest kid, who are we going to call into our corner to help us fight? That is what I think Trump sees. He sees that we're getting all the economic benefits, but we're not getting any of the defense benefits, the military benefits, the innovation benefits. Like, being the top dog just makes you threat number one. Being the top dog by a lot means everybody wants to be your friend and nobody wants to try very hard. So what he's proposing is, hey, let's be a little bit more isolationist. Let's let the world figure its shit out, which might mean let the world burn a little bit, and then see who really comes up to align themselves with us because they've earned it, not just because we forced them to. After World War II, our strategy was strong arm everybody into following us. That's why we rebuilt Japan. That's why we rebuilt Germany. That's why we rebuilt the UK and France and Poland. We rebuilt all of Europe to make them dependent on us. Fantastic strategy in the 1950s and 60s. It's not working out for us now. Not with the rise of transnational threats, not with the evolution of technology, not with the evolution of resistance partners that are finding reasons to collaborate. We've never, in the history of the United States, we've never seen multiple strategic threats ally themselves above their own personal, like, economic interests in order just to create an axis of resistance against us outside of war. There's a phenomenal article that actually went out recently in a journal called The Hill, or a periodical called The Hill, talking about how unprecedented this is. Foreign Policy also did a piece on how unprecedented it is that you have North Korea and Russia and China and Iran all cooperating outside of war against the United States when they don't have anything else in common except us. And that's enough to make them cooperate. What happens when you start looking at their combined purchase price parity against our independent purchase price parity? Now, all of a sudden, they can create more ships, more troops, more weapons, more trade than we can, even though their currency is less valuable than our currency.
Do you see this as a Nazi Germany, Russia under Stalin alliance that is they're just gonna turn on each other lickety split? Or do you see them actually being able to hold it together and become a block of power?
I see it more like the BRICS nations. I see it more like when it serves them pragmatically and they retain continuity with their strongman leadership. When those two situations exist, there could be no end in sight for continued collaboration and cooperation, right? Just North Korea is a great example. North Korea has never had a chance against South Korea in terms of open military conflict ever, because South Korean troops are actively practicing conflict all over the world all the time. North Korea was never doing that. Well, now they have North Korean troops actively exercising conflict in Russia. They have active North Korean generals seeing what it's like to command troops in conflict. Does that mean that North Korea is suddenly a threat? No. But it means that they're making progress in terms of military readiness and military capability. For me, progress is a red flag for North Korea. It's the opposite of isolating them and squashing them. And South Korea, in contrast, is going through declaring martial law and impeaching the 13th president in history for them to basically go to jail. South Korea, which is one of the strongest democracies in Asia, has put 12 former presidents behind bars since like
crazy.
1950. And now they're doing it again. That's not a promising representation of democracy. So we see what some would argue, South Korea being weaker, North Korea getting stronger. And it's just for now, but if you take now and you magnify it 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, then what's North Korea look like in 10 years? You and I are only 10 years older in 10 years, but a shit ton can happen in 10 years. Look at how much the world changed from the start of the global war on terror to today.
Dude,
right?
Look at beginning of COVID till now.
Yeah.
Bananas.
And technology just exacerbates it. Information exchange just exacerbates it. You've got Russia trading nuclear technology, North Korea trading troops. You've got Russians firing weapons that are North Korean and Iranian made. Iran gets to find out if its drones work, and then Iran uses its drones in Israel. Everybody's testing the limits of anti-aircraft and missile defense shields. Like, the world is still very much in a state of conflict and disarray, not because, like you said, not because we are in hot World War III necessarily, but we are definitely testing what level of commitment we want to make to full-blown conflict. Are we willing to have Hezbollah and Hamas launch rockets simultaneously with Yemen and Iran? How's Israel going to handle that? Israel doesn't want to take any chances with that, which is why they're reaching into the Golan Heights to keep an eye on everything from Lebanon to Syria and south. It's a fascinating world right now because we continue to escalate in conflict, and we're all watching ourselves escalate in conflict, but our priority is still, well, what affects us day to day.
Yeah. As the New World Order is getting established here, if Trump is stepping back and letting maybe a little bit of the world burn, what do you think is going to be the role of AI, drone warfare? What's that all going to be?
The future is AI. I think everybody knows that. You were mentioning earlier, what if the intelligence agencies step back, let AI take more of a role, field officers submit their reports directly to AI, AI becomes kind of the consummate central repository for information. All of that is phenomenal in theory. In practice, it'll take some getting used to. But what I'll also say is CIA has been using AI from before I joined in 2007. They've been using AI produced by contracts that are still classified that you can find on the open internet, but I can't acknowledge them. There were contracts that were using AI to do exactly what you were saying, to take raw data and use it to create networks that could be analyzed by human analysts and converted into targeting matrices for operators to pursue. So we've been using this since 2006, 2007. We know it's
in ways that would shock people.
I don't think it would shock people because we all know how AI works now.
Right.
But in 2008, people would have found it shocking.
Yeah.
But we're cutting thousands of research hours. That's what we were doing when I was still there, cutting thousands of research hours to get information that was actionable in hours instead of in months. So that there's no reason to believe that wouldn't be the cause or the case for the future. AI that prioritizes, AI that highlights, AI that risk calculates, AI that could potentially tell us what would have happened in Afghanistan and Syria faster than humans told us. But the common denominator is still the person who has to scrub the AI output to determine whether or not it's prioritized correctly or quality.
What about AI that kills? You think that's the future of warfare?
I think that's the direction it needs to go, frankly.
Needs to go.
Yeah. Because when you have the problem that exists right now, and you're seeing it with the fact that Netanyahu's sitting on a tribunal with the ICC, everything is subjective right now. People think something, people say something, there's no objective data behind it, so then they have to make decisions based off of subjective data. Is Netanyahu a war criminal? Maybe. Did he take actions intending to become a war criminal? Probably not. But we don't know because we don't have any objective proof. And if that trial moves forward, what kind of evidence are they going to collect? Same thing with Putin. Putin is also accused by the ICC of being a war criminal. Did he take actions that were criminal in nature? Maybe. But it's just as justifiable that he approved actions that were being taken because Ukraine had established a policy that forced people to enlist. So now all Ukrainian infrastructure is essentially pulled into the military conflict effort. Therefore, all Ukrainian infrastructure is now a military target. How do you try that? How do you objectively determine, yes, he's a war criminal, no, he's not? Yes, it was a legit target, no, it was not. We're seeing the same thing with Israel bombing hospitals in Gaza. Now there are some people saying, well, those hospitals haven't demonstrated enough proof to have been valid military targets. How are you going to prove that? With a computer-driven, AI-driven system, all of that is logged. It's all put into ones and zeros. It's all fed into a blockchain. It's all irrefutable evidence in the future because it was a program that chose to pull the trigger. And that program can be assessed, updated, hacked. There's vulnerabilities, right? But it also means less living people have to die. You could have one tier 1 operator controlling 5 robots that are driven by their own AI that are actually, taking down a building. That's exactly what the United States Air Force has done with drone operators that sit in Nevada and fly Reaper drones all throughout the Middle East. They can literally jump from drone to drone to drone. So this one person can run 5 combat sorties from 5 separate drones that have just been orbiting. What a day at work that is, dude. You show up and you're like, oh, drone A, neutralized, drone B, neutralized. And they do the work. All this person has to do is carry the qualifications to say the feed is accurate, the drones are up to date, targets have been neutralized. Then the drones tell you everything else.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think drones, first of all, getting cheaper is going to be a huge thing. But then the fighter jets that they have, AI versus AI wins, I think, like 100 out of 100 times against a human. It's pretty interesting. I don't know what that will do to war, though, when you're suddenly like, oh, I'm not worried about risking lives in the immediate sense, but I am going to, like has happened in the Gaza Strip, just make it uninhabitable. And so, yeah, I mean, look, saving human lives, way better. I would rather a city get destroyed than lose all the people. But unchecked aggression because, oh, well, nobody's getting killed in this. This is how you can completely dismantle infrastructure and really cause major problems to quality of life.
So before you go down too scary a road, right? There is checked aggression because the response is the check and balance to the aggression. And then at the end of the day, you also have the intellectual property that goes into the mechanics of the machine. So now it can make sense if you're thinking through a movie lens. Oh, we have robotic drones and they're going to attack. And then we have robotic anti-aircraft systems and they're going to counterattack. And it's going to be constant conflict. The truth is, as soon as those robotic drones come in and get neutralized, that's a treasure trove of intelligence. So now the anti-aircraft might shoot them down, and then people swoop in and they pull out the code, the targeting systems, they hack through the encryption. It's a massive loss. So that is the deterrent against it. So what you see here is as one technology increases, that is an offensive technology, the opposition also increases their investments into security to deter the first one from moving forward. And then the first one invests more and the second one invests more, and it keeps on going up.
Escalating arms race.
I mean, an arms race is what we know it as. It's a security dilemma. That's what it's called. The security dilemma, which is that even if no conflict exists, everybody's investing on both sides. You buy a house, I buy a house next door. We just have houses. You put up a fence. Well, why did you put up a fence? I don't know. So I put up a fence to make sure that I'm not falling behind while you put up a fence. You get a dog. Why'd you get a dog? So I get a dog. You train your dog to be a guard dog. I train my dog to be a guard dog. You buy a handgun. I buy a handgun. You buy a better lock. I buy a better lock. All of a sudden, people drive by both of our houses on the street and they're like, 2 compounds, right? Both alike in dignity in Fair Verona, where we let our scene. But that's the security dilemma. We're seeing that happen all over the world. It's also predictable because as one person feels threatened by their neighbor, they take actions to feel less in danger if their neighbor chooses to take their defensive posture and make it an offensive posture. The same thing is going to happen with AI. People are going to be investing in it. People are going to be growing their capability, but that doesn't mean there's going to be unchecked aggression. It does mean that there'll be more to lose when you carry out an attack, which makes for more testing, which is what we're seeing all over the world right now. The reason Ukraine still stands is because Russia is holding back some of its best weaponry. We saw that with Oreshnik. Oreshnik is, nobody saw that coming in the public sector, right? An ICBM launching conventional weapons at a speed that no intercept could predict. So if Russia's holding back and Ukraine's all in, then who's got the advantage of information here, right? Hamas and Lebanon and Hezbollah lobbying homemade rockets into Israel. And still, even with those homemade rockets, 10% of them get through the missile defense shield. What's that tell Iran about their top shelf cruise missiles and about their custom made drones, right? So now Iran gets to test those every now and then in these large launches. 25%, 30% get through. That's incredibly informative information. But the flip side is now whatever was on those drones, Israel has access to and now understands the capability of the drones that come from Iran.
Yeah, this is going to start to get weird when you look at somewhere like Israel that's so close with neighbors that want to blow it up. When you get a Chinese style swarm of drones that can come over in the thousands armed, even if armed with just grenades. Like that can get gnarly really fast.
So you mentioned drones, and I want to talk about this because I've been disappointed by the coverage in the press about the drones over New Jersey, the drones over the Northeast. And I'm taking a hard dog leg here, so tell me if you don't like it.
The only reason this wasn't earlier, because I'm glad we're talking about it, the only reason it wasn't earlier is by the time this airs, I hope we know what these are. So yeah, but say more. So when we talk about the drones that are happening right now over the Northeast, or the drones in recent history over the Northeast, there are two things happening simultaneously, but they're not being differentiated in the press. First, there are legitimate reports of drones operating over areas of interest in Germany, in the UK, in military bases on the East and the West Coast, going all the way back to 2019. Whoa.
All the way back to 2019, reported by the US military, reported and investigated by the FBI. I've been called in to do investigations to support both to help them try to understand what they're seeing. When the military talks about drones, they're not talking about what the fucking media is showing on TV. A military drone does not have, generally, 4 propellers, a green light and a red light, a front white light, and a top white light that flashes. That's not a military drone. That's a civilian drone. Or that's an airplane, or that's a helicopter. That's all standard FAA lighting configurations. So yes, there is truth to the current reports and the recent reports that say the majority of drone sightings are what we call false positives, right? It looks like a drone. It sounds like a drone because it's coming from somebody who has no fucking idea what a drone looks or sounds like. They're actually seeing a private Cessna at 2,000 feet that sounds like a lawnmower and has all the right lighting configuration, not a drone, right? But the reports that the military has seen over Ramstein, over the UK bases, over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, the most significant sighting of all happened in 2019, was a swarm of between 75 and 150 drones that are military-style drones. Think about your Reaper, right? Fixed wing, blacked out, no lights, moving at more than 100 miles an hour, in swarm configurations that fly over an area of interest and then fly back, right? We're talking about a normal drone has a range of 30 miles, 70 miles, maybe. A commercial drone. A Reaper has ranges in the thousands of miles, right? They have drones for the US military that are recharged by sunlight. So you just launch that son of a bitch above the clouds and it can go on for days and it can just loiter.
Wow.
And it can collect infrared, it can collect signals intelligence, it can collect whatever, and then it can fly back. What the military has reported going back to November of this year is those drones. Blacked out drones not operated by a manned pilot, operating on code and signals and transmitting a radio signal that's usually reserved for satellite technology, but coming from the space above our heads.
Whoa.
That's what they're talking about. That's what's in Virginia. That's what's in California. That's what's in Maryland. That's what's been reported multiple times over that has never really made headlines because of the way the media works. It's not government controlled, but media just doesn't care about actually interesting things. They care about what's happening with the Kardashians.
Yeah.
So there are real drones that are really suspect, that are really being collected by the military. And then there's Tom, Dick, and Nancy, your dumb voter out there with a fucking camera, who are capturing air traffic and reporting it to the police. And the police don't know what the fuck to do with that. So now you're burying the real intel in all this chaos, right? FBI has known, and they've been investigating through the increasing UAP research groups that have been funded by DOD and funded by the Congress. They've been researching what these things are because it's scary. It's actually scary. It is a legit foreign intelligence collection platform, very similar to the China spy balloon in 2023. It's a capability that exists. It exists for us too. No, everybody's known we've had that drone capability since the global war on terror, but others are producing the same capability and nobody knows what to do with it. So there's two things happening. The media only talks about the first. And the more that I see reports from people saying, oh, it's just residents reporting on air traffic, that's not completely incorrect. But they're glazing over the fact that this whole thing started when the UK reported drones that had no lights and transmitted radio signals flying over American military bases in the UK. That's where this started on November 20th. It wasn't December 1st when there was December 5th. There's a manhunt for Luigi Mangione, the guy who shot Brian Thompson from United Healthcare. There's a manhunt happening for him on the Northeast. Guess what it includes? Drones. So the skies above New York and Pennsylvania and Maryland light up with drones at the same time that the police are reporting that they're on a manhunt using drones. I'm not surprised here, folks.
Right.
Of course you're seeing drones overhead. But don't lose the signal in the noise.
So what do you think it is?
I think that there's a foreign intelligence collection happening against the United States that has been happening against the United States, but that is now at risk of coming to light. So that's why you see a unified messaging from the US government that says you don't have to worry because they know they can't do anything about it.
Why can't they shoot them down?
What happens if you shoot down a drone over a populated city like Maryland, like Baltimore?
You meaning it'll crash on the city?
So what do you think Americans are going to accept? A lie from the federal government saying they don't have to worry, or 5 people dead because it crashed into an apartment complex, but it gave them a chance to collect the technology that was out there? No, not only that, but when you shoot it down,
at some point it has to go back to wherever it came from. Why not track it?
That's what they're doing. If you shoot the fucker down, you can't track it back. They're collecting information about how they communicate with each other. They're tracking the locations. They're tracking the altitudes. They're tracking the distances. What people don't understand is that all the technology out there, from missile shields to counter UAS technology, it has parameters. You don't just look at everything happening in the sky. You have to tell things what aperture to look at, what altitude to look at, what time of day, what speed. Like you have to give parameters to the tool. So if you tell the tool to look at 5,000 feet, anything moving faster than 100 miles an hour, something could be moving less than 100 miles an hour and not trigger the system. Our adversaries know that, and the fucking adversaries know exactly what our settings are, because that's why they've been committing industrial espionage and corporate espionage and government espionage for the last 30 years against us. So this is their chance to see if we pick them up, if we don't pick them up. And the United States always has the opportunity to just call it a UFO or a UAP. Again, I'm not making this shit up. If you just look at the news reporting the week before the China spy balloon, and look at the news reporting for about the next 2 months after the China spy balloon. There were UFOs in the sky until we said, oh, actually, it's a Chinese spy balloon. Then people lost their shit. We blew up the spy balloon. And then guess what? There were 3 more balloons that flew overhead over the next 3 months. What do we call them? UFOs. And we didn't budge from that. They're just UFOs. We don't know what they are, folks. They're just UFOs. And the UFO community was like, oh, there's aliens visiting us. The government was just like, America can't handle if we tell them it's another spy balloon. And then the government shot down science balloons from what was it? The University of Auburn and somebody else. They were shooting down science balloons because the technology that we had couldn't identify the payload on the balloon. Like, the government is not as well equipped as we all think it is. It's not Mission Impossible. It's not James Bond. It's always adapting to what the adversary is throwing at us, and the adversary is always adapting to what we're not looking for.
Right.
So swarms of of UFOs, of UAPs, of UASs, whatever they want to call them now, swarms of drones flying on the outskirts of American airspace, making incursions and excursions, collecting what they can from signals intelligence, imagery analysis, infrared technology, collecting everything they can, autonomously flown using only why would they use satellite radio signals? Because guess what they're communicating with? Satellites to get back to their home station, because you don't even need ground-based relays if you have something flying high enough at altitude. We've known this in military circles. We've known this in intelligence circles. We've known this in open source circles for a long time. It's just never made mainstream news. Now that it has started to make mainstream news, your dumb voter has intervened and has buried the story, which is very convenient to what the government needs to be able to get out of this.
Wow, that is very shocking that we would rather it be aliens than foreign intelligence.
Why is that
drones.
shocking? Why is that shocking, though? Think about it. If you know that it's a foreign adversary over your head, that scares the shit out of you. When you believe it's an alien overhead, you're mixed. Could be hopeful, could be bad, could be neutral. We want to feel safe.
That's retarded. That's actually retarded. I'm very angry right now. It really does make me feel like we're not doing the right thing if we're not addressing it. I do default to keep the public informed. I know, though, that that's naive at scale, and so I want to acknowledge that. But what is the play here?
I think the play is wise. Unfortunately, and I don't have many
Meaning keep lying to the
keep
public?
lying to the public.
Wow.
And I mean, hate me if you want to hate me, but the truth is, when you keep the secrets, you have the power. You can always release a secret, but you can't ever put it back in its box. So if you have secrets, keep them. It's why business owners know this instinctively. You don't tell your competition your secret sauce. There's no benefit to you in doing that. The federal government knows there's no benefit in telling the people, the public, what they're actually seeing in the sky. There's a benefit in telling them what the public is seeing in the sky, but there's no benefit in telling them what they, the military and the government, are actually seeing in the sky. That is worth further research, because when you acknowledge a secret, yes, you tell the public, which you may have a responsibility for, but you also tell the adversary. And if you're trying to protect the public, you can't tell the adversary. So until we have some kind of technology that lets us inform American citizens but not inform everybody else, we have to keep the secret.
Yeah, okay. I get that. I need to think through it more to have an official opinion. But when we're seeing them sort of nakedly out in the open, God, continually lying to the public. Anyway, I'm going to plant a flag in that as something I need to contend with in my own mind.
And I think it's a good flag to plant. I think we should all be flagging ourselves to say, are we comfortable being lied to? I am comfortable being lied to. My time in the government, my time at CIA made me very, very comfortable with being racially profiled. It made me very comfortable with not having the levels of privacy that we're all told we have. It made me very comfortable with the government keeping secrets from me, because I can see the benefit for me in all three of these areas that isn't just blind ignorance. Like, racially profile me? Absolutely. I'm a brown guy with black hair. I got a shady ass looking, you don't know whether I'm fucking Palestinian or Israeli or Sunni or Shia or Indian. You don't know what I am. So pull my ass over. Let me show you my driver's license, because I'm fucking American. It's going to be a 5-minute inconvenience to me, and then I'm done. And especially if it's like a local cop, if I live in a place where there's only 12 or 15 cops that police me anyways, they all know who I am. And then they stop suspecting me of being whatever the fuck they think I am, because they know what I am. I have zero problem with me being racially profiled. I understand if other people don't like it. You want to listen to my phone calls? You want to read my emails? Go right ahead. Because you know what I'm not doing? Cheating on my taxes, cheating on my wife, or stealing from my own company. Not doing it. So you're going to waste your time, but you're also going to confirm that I'm not the suspect you're looking for. Somewhere out there are bad people doing bad things, disguising themselves as good people doing good things. You're never going to find them unless you have a chance to rule me out. So I'm completely okay with that. And now that I've been part of CIA and I've seen the secrets that we have to keep, not just from ourselves, but also from other intelligence agencies, when there's a spy at NSA, You can't tell NSA who you suspect their spy to be. You have to tell FBI. So FBI can look into it, because if you tell NSA, it might leak back to that person. There's always a reason to keep a secret. And I benefit when the government keeps the right secrets. When the government's keeping secrets because they're inefficient or corrupt or whatever, incompetent, that's a whole different story. But I still understand the value of secrets.
All right. Does racial profiling work?
It's a fair question. I mean, racial profiling would work theoretically if there was an objective conclusion that was reached each time somebody was profiled. But if you profile someone, like if a cop pulls me over, checks my ID, and they're like, oh, he's an American citizen, he's not doing anything nefarious. If their internal bias is, I still don't trust him, that's not objective. That's subjective. And now they just keep looking at me just because I'm brown. Again, I don't care personally, because 8 out of 10 cops are good cops. They're trying to do a good job. So let them do their job. And the 2 that are either incompetent or don't have good intentions, I can't account for that. But 80-20 rule applies.
You must believe that something good comes out of it. Otherwise, why racially profile?
I agree. You have to believe something good would come out of it to racially profile. That's why I don't know that there's enough objective information to say that it's a good idea, but I also don't know that there's enough objective information to flat out say that it's a bad idea.
It's interesting. I mean, this is what makes you a fascinating guest and why you will forever be invited on people's podcasts. Man, do you just say the thing. I love it. Okay, so racially profiling, maybe yes, maybe no, we don't know, and therefore let it roll. Here would be my take on reading emails, listening in on phone calls. I feel like recently, more so than previously, and I'm sure it's been going on forever, but the justice system has been weaponized for political end. And I don't want to live in a world where the data on all of us is just being collected, and the moment we need to get rid of you, we just go with something. Because even if you're not doing something illegal, I can spin enough doubt based on something that you did to get people to go against you. And now, even if I can't take you out, I can mire you in political bullshit for a long time. Trump is clearly built differently in that, good Lord, the amount of times that he's been sued, attacked, blah, 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 like that's just crazy. I'll just be honest. If people were going after me like that, I'd be like, oh, just don't run for president. You guys leave me alone. All right, peace. Bye, everybody. That's pure insanity. So I don't like that. I don't like that somebody can just build a database on me and be like, oh, word? Like, cool. I'm putting a marketing package together with all these things. It doesn't even need to be true. I just need to frame you in a way that makes you look horrible. I've had journalists make me sound crazy. So I can only imagine if somebody were recording my private phone calls. I mean, I had an article written. In fact, have I ever talked about this on camera? I can't remember if I have. I once said, dude, I don't know why people are looking for reasons to not pay attention to somebody. If somebody has 99% terrible ideas, but 1% great ideas, I want to know about the 1% great ideas. I would have Mussolini on my show if I thought I could learn something from him. And the Jewish Times wrote an article, Tom Bilyeu wants to interview Mussolini. I'm like, bitch, I did not say that. What I said was, and so I get how you can take little bits and bobs like that and you can really make somebody look like a sociopath. It's like the N-word supercut for Rogan, right? Somebody who, I don't know him, but my gut instinct is the guy is not racist, but whoa, did that look fucking terrible. Yeah. So that's my beef. That's just like, I get that we don't have the privacy that we think we do, but I don't want the government just running up a tab like that. But you're saying it's worth it.
I'm saying it's worth it. And let's be honest, today, the date, time on the calendar, the date, time on the release date of this, it could be a completely different opinion in 3 years. Who knows what happens if it's weaponized against me?
Right.
But where I sit today, 8 out of 10 people that I served with have no interest in degrading you as an American citizen. They have every interest in the world in rooting out good Americans so that they can only focus on the people who are trying to abuse our immigration system, our communication system, our green card system, and do something bad against Americans. If we protect you, we artificially protect them. And how do you find the balance there? Until we find a smarter way to do it, I'm all for open door policy. Like, hey, If you want to see who's making bombs, if you want to see who's making meth in their kitchen, let's just have everybody open their kitchen windows, right? And you're going to see me walking around sometimes without any pants on, making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And that's embarrassing.
You don't need your pants off to make it. That's one way to spread the peanut butter and jelly. I've never tried.
So it might be embarrassing to me, but when the neighbor is the one that's making meth, that's who everybody's looking for. So I might be a punchline in a joke, but that person's no longer on my block because they're taken to prison and justice runs its course. And then we can all close our windows again, right? I don't know. For
Have
me,
you read 1984?
Big Brother didn't do that. Big Brother was abusing that power.
You don't think it'll be abused?
It could very well be abused. I'm not saying it couldn't. I'm just saying that even with the probability of abuse, it's worth it for me right now, man.
Interesting. What's fascinating is you're the guy that's looked at the bullets that we have dodged. I hate everything about what you're saying, but I fully recognize that I have not seen the bullets that we have dodged. Let's talk about a bullet that I worry is loaded in the chamber that what you're talking about now may help with, even though, again, I don't love this. America versus the cartels. How much have you looked at that? This one feels scary.
I haven't looked at it too greatly. There is a standing mission in the intelligence community called counter-narcotics. And in that counter-narcotics mission, we are, yes, countering the spread of narcotics into our borders, but we're also trying to reduce the narcotics trade because the narcotics trade has secondary and tertiary benefits to Islamic extremism, dictatorships, autocracies, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all sorts of bad things that come from drug cartels. But at the same time, one of the best weapons that we use to fight cartels is cartels because they're very easy to turn against each other. It's very easy to spread misinformation among an ignorant group of people who are basically all just guns for hire, trying to either make a dollar or start their own drug trade by waiting out their boss until their boss gets killed so they move up the ladder. So counter influence and influence campaigns to counter the counter narcotics world is a very ripe business. It's a very enjoyable, very rewarding, very creative space for intelligence work.
Interesting. Now, I haven't looked at this super closely, but I've heard sort of headliney stuff that as a red-blooded American, I get a little excited about. I want you to tamper my enthusiasm here, where the thought of cartels setting up base like in California with the weed trade, SEAL Team 6, baby, send them in, smash some skulls, fuck shit up. Like, that's one where I want to send a message. Now, again, I know when I'm on an emotional thing and when I definitely should not be listened to, I should not be listened to here. But why isn't that the right response?
If you tactically take down a cartel inside American borders using American resources, you're first of all, you're demonstrating what your capability is. And you're also demonstrating to the American people that you weren't able to prevent it from happening in the first place.
Well,
so it's a double-edged sword.
Right now, Trump has an open check to say, Biden let him in, and we're going to take him out.
Right now, for sure. Strategically, so tactically, I would say if they're already here and we need them out, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't use U.S. resources to get them out. That said, there are there's government policy and government regulations that dictate the authorities to different groups to take action on American soil. For example, the Coast Guard is one of the only American military elements that has the policy to discharge a weapon on American soil. So you can't really send in SEAL Team 6 or 10 or 5 to kill a bunch of California-based drug traffickers unless you carve out a space in their authorities to send them in, which may already exist. Navy SEALs will know better than I do, right? But it's one of those complications. Whereas you could send in DEA, you could send in FBI, you could send in local SWAT, you could send in Coast Guard, theoretically, depending on the zones, right? To take care of that threat. Is that the right capability for the right situation? I don't know, but that's part of what we deal with and the inefficiency of government that maybe Doge will be able to fix. So root them out. I mean, I lived in Montana when I was with the Air Force. It was like meth central.
Oh, fun.
In 2009, 2010. a terrible place. I mean, billboards on highways. Anybody from Montana knows what I'm talking about. Billboards on highways trying to get people not to smoke meth, trying to get people not to buy meth.
Like Dare kind of thing? Or just
kind of like Dare, but only
hey,
darker.
Sally.
I mean, I remember some just disgusting things up on billboards, people's faces rotted out and like children and women having these sad images where they talk about how sex trade is tied to the meth trade.
On billboards.
On billboards. Wow. All across Montana through the Great Falls area. If you guys know what I'm talking about, drop it in the comments so Tom knows that I'm not lying to him. Incredible trade through the Montana area for the meth world. So, I mean, I am all for get that shit out. I don't want my kids doing it. I don't want my future daughter doing it. I don't want my future son participating in it. I don't want my wife having to see that shit when she drives to and from her favorite sushi joint, whatever. Like, get it out. Once it's out, the strategy has to change. You have to keep it out. How do you keep it out becomes a long-term question, because you're not going to keep drugs out. People forget that the rest of the world doesn't operate like the United States. The rest of the world, drugs are a real trade. Sex trafficking is a real trade. Human slavery is a real trade. Legal in many, many countries.
What?
Ignored. Oh, yeah.
Legal.
Legal meaning it isn't prosecuted.
Whoa.
Whether it's corrupt or whether it's outright legal. Just look at the UAE, man. Look at Saudi Arabia. Look at the UAE. Look at Oman. Look at Bahrain. All four of these are rich collegiate countries that are all allies with the United States, that all claim to support human rights, and they all four openly engage in human slavery. They not African slavery like we had back in the Civil War days, but very similar to the Reconstruction days, where people are indentured, where their passports are held, where they're given a not fair day's wage and they have to work themselves. They have to work off their freedom to get their passport back so they can go back home. That shit happens to Filipinos, Indians, Pakistanis. It happens to Syrians, all throughout the Middle East. Is it graced by legal code where it says we allow slavery? No, but graced by legal code is it is legal to hold somebody's passport until they pay off their fees for the career that they're in.
Wow. Not
legal in the United States, right? But what I'm saying is this is how the world works. It's just not how the United States works. One of the big reasons why we have to maintain our hegemony, because if we don't change the world is damn sure going to change us.
You said back in July that you wanted Michelle Obama to run and win. Why? And how are you feeling as an American, as a guy I care about, with the Trump victory?
So it wasn't that I wanted Michelle Obama to win. I thought she was the only person that had a chance against Donald Trump. I want to differentiate those two, right? I was still an undecided voter when Kamala Harris was announced. I was still an undecided voter a week before the elections, right? So like many of us probably listening, the Democratic National Convention lost their only opportunity to beat Donald Trump this cycle when they didn't have Michelle Obama run. And I guarantee you that Michelle and Barack had an awkward fucking dinner sometime where Barack had said, Michelle, you should run. And Michelle came up with some reason why she wasn't going to run. I'll do it in 28. I'll do it after my book tour. We don't need that stress for our family. Whatever the fuck her reason was. There was an awkward dinner conversation where she sat there not saying anything and he sat there not saying anything. And what they were saying was a whole hell of a lot to each other. Because if they really believe what they said, because what they were saying is that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the American democratic system. If they really believe in that shit, no book tour is going to keep you from running for office. No inconvenience to your family life is going to keep you from running. If you know that you're the only thing that stands between an existential threat and the country you love, you're going to stand up in front of that bullet. I know countless people who have stood up in front of that bullet to make sure that they were protecting Americans. So either their narrative, their messaging was false, or they incorrectly thought that Kamala Harris had a chance against Donald Trump. I don't know which one. But personally, I am feeling like America has the government it needs right now. It has changes and shakeups. It might burn down. It might not. We are going through puberty, and puberty sucks. But we're still a young country, man. And we need to go through this phase. I remember growing pains. I remember the first erections. I remember when you couldn't wear silk boxer shorts to school anymore in middle school. I'm sure you remember all that stuff too.
Silk boxer shorts.
You don't remember?
Bro, I grew up in Tacoma. There's no such thing as silk boxer shorts.
Well, we called them silk. They were probably actually like sateen, whatever that knockoff
rayon
satin.
or
Yes,
whatever
right.
it was.
Back when we were 11 years old or some shit.
That is hilarious.
Remember when everything got really awkward and you were like, it's never going to get better? That's exactly where we are as a country right now. We need to figure our shit out. We're still juveniles in the world of how long an empire or government lasts. So we have what we need right now. The Dems hopefully learned an important lesson that you can't go up against someone like Donald Trump by doubling down on the old ways of who's sanctified by the current president. Even the precedent of presidents nominating vice presidents to become presidents, the precedent empirically was that she would lose. But they did it anyways. So I feel quite comfortable. I feel like my kids are at a great age to actually watch and see what's happening in the world. It's hilarious because my kids speak with such confidence about things they know nothing about because they hear everybody around them. And we're in Colorado now. So we live in Colorado Springs right now, which is like this conservative enclave surrounded by a very liberal Colorado. So depending on what friend they're talking to or what parent is having what conversation at the same time that they're having a play date, my kids come back and they're like, we're so glad Donald Trump won. And then sometimes they're like, Harris was robbed. And then sometimes they're like, Biden was such a great leader. And then sometimes they're like, that Biden guy was losing his mind. It's hilarious because you can,
at their age,
because that's what they're hearing. They're parroting back the messaging that they're hearing from everybody else. But it's such an awesome chance to have a conversation to say, why do you think that? Why do you think that person said that? What about this person's lifestyle or that person's lifestyle makes you think that they support Donald Trump or support Kamala Harris? And I love it whenever they bring data points that are contradictory, right? Oh, here's like an evangelical Christian that was voting for Harris. Or here's a career government employee who is like, whatever, works for Peterson Air Force Base who is voting for Biden, whatever else it might be. I love it when they bring things that don't make sense to me because I can see that it doesn't make sense to them. And it gives me a chance to tell them like, hey, everybody has beliefs that they believe, but don't say, and then beliefs that they say, depending on the crowd that they're with. And that's such a great lesson for my kids to understand because sometimes they see me on screen. Sometimes they see me in private. Sometimes they see me talking to mom. Sometimes they see me not telling mom the truth because I don't want mom to have a bad day because if mom has a bad day, I'm going to have a bad night.
Whoa, say more. So wait. Does your wife know that you deploy that tactic?
For sure.
And she's like, word, sanctioned.
Correct.
I'm here for this.
Correct. Because she knows that there are things that are triggers for both of us. And you know what's a trigger for Lisa. Yes. Lisa knows what's a trigger for you.
Yes.
If you participate in triggering activity 15 minutes before bed, everybody's pissed.
Okay.
So we just avoid the trigger or we dampen down the trigger or we just find a different topic.
Now, I will for sure delay reporting something to my wife. So we have a rule, like on the weekends, I'm not going to bring up anything stressful. So I'll set an alarm. I'll remember to tell you on Monday. But the number of nights, certainly in our early marriage, that I ruined by being honest with her and would do over and over and over. And is the thing that I advise to people, because if the person doesn't believe that they can trust what you say, there's going to be a time we have to cash that chip to their benefit. Like, so the easy one is, I will tell my wife, like, you look beautiful, right? As she gets older. And I'm like, hey, I think you look stunning. And then she's going to have an insecure moment. Oh, well, I used to be, more attractive when I was younger. And it's like, I have been honest with you every time when it was hard, when it ended a fun evening. So why do you think I would suddenly lie to you now? And because of that, she can feel the full weight of that positive thing. It's interesting. I have a real thing about that.
Well, I don't mind whatever your thing is, right?
I don't mind it. Don't make me do it, Tom, but I don't mind it.
My wife and I have something that we call hard conversations.
Yes.
It was just something that, again, the agency instilled in us because when you're actually at the pointy end of the spear, in a field operation, in a marriage, in a business, there are times you have to have the hard conversation. But if you can have a hard conversation at a time where there's space and energy, that the hard conversation will have a productive outcome, you can always defer the hard conversation to the right time. Having the hard conversation at the wrong time, just because you want to have it at that time, isn't taking into account the progress of the outcome. It's just taking into account what you care about in that moment. So with my wife and I, especially knowing her anxiety issues and her challenges with depression, understanding that my wife is thinking about 10 things at any given time, chances are at least 5 of the 10 things she's thinking about is shit I should be thinking about, but I'm not smart enough to think about it at that moment. Do I really want to interrupt her right now at this moment with the thing that I believe to be important right now? I can also just ask her like, hey, I wanted to have a conversation about XYZ. I don't want to trigger you. Is now a good time, or should we save it for the morning? Kind of like what you were saying now. I'm not saying ignore it. I'm just saying strategically deploy when you have the hard conversation. Because to your point, over time, we all remember when somebody tells us the truth. But moment to moment, we very rarely ever value that this moment in time is when you tell me the truth. It's something that accrues.
I see it slightly differently. So there is I don't know what's on your mind and you're not bringing it up. I'm okay with that. Now you're asking them to carry a burden, but fair enough. It's my birthday or it's a weekend and I've been really stressed. Yes, I want you to carry that burden and wait until Monday. But like I told my wife this morning, she literally came to me and said, there's something I want to talk to you about, but it's stressful. Is now a good time? And I'm like, once you tell me you have a stressful thing, you just have to tell me. Yeah. So either bite your tongue, hold it till later, or just come out and say it. So I was like, yeah, just tell me right now, whatever the stressful thing is. But I would not want her to lie about it. So if I ask and let's say there's the world's most stressful answer and I was foolish enough to ask about it at a time that is absolutely just not the time to talk about it, I would expect her to say, look, I have an answer to that. I think it's gonna be super stressful. We're about to go to bed. Why don't we talk about it in the morning? And then I have a choice to say, okay, look, I need to know. Just tell me now. Or I can be like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go to bed. But I wouldn't want her to be like, oh, no. It's all good. Nothing on my mind. You're good. Go to bed. That I would not like, because then I won't trust it the next time.
Okay. It's fair. I would say it probably happens what you just described happens probably 1,000 times a day to every average person where we know we're being lied to. I will also say that there are different types of lies. So there's a difference between someone who knows exactly what they're feeling and then lies and says, don't worry about it, versus the person who knows they're feeling something, but hasn't yet processed what they're feeling. They just know they're upset. And then they say, don't worry about it. It's nothing, right? There's 2 different categories of lie there, arguably, because they're both the intent to deceive. Only one is deceiving something specific. The other is deceiving something that is generalized. And there's benefits. Again, I believe in secrets. You're probably not surprised. I believe in lies.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. How do you help people, or do you know how to help people that have a feeling, but they don't know what it means. They don't know what the cause of it is.
It's surprisingly common, actually, that people don't know how to identify what it is that they're feeling. So a lot of the digital courses that we have at Everyday Spy are really just deep dives into how the brain works, into how you cognitively process information, because we all have a different process for information. I think we've discussed that CIA uses something called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI, and most of the government uses the MBTI as their primary operational personality tool. There are other tools that they also employ, but generally speaking, when they need to do something at scale, they roll out the MBTI because it's easy to understand, it's easy to implement, it's 80% accurate. There's always something better, but sometimes what you need is a general starting place. All the MBTI is, as a personality test, is a way of engaging and measuring somebody's relationship with energy and their relationship with information. That's really all it is. The first letter in the MBTI, extrovert or introvert, E or I, it's all a measure of energy. Do you get your energy being alone? Do you get your energy being in public? Oversimplified, very operational. Then you start getting into whether somebody is a sensor or an intuitor. Sensors and intuitors they only differentiate based on information. How do you engage with information? Sensors want proof. They want to see it. They want to touch it. They want to taste it. That's how they engage with information. It's tangible. Intuitors intuit information, They can visualize it. They can see it. They believe it. They don't need to touch it. They don't need to measure it. They don't need to have it proven, right? The third letter between thinkers and feelers is how they make decisions based off the information they have. Feelers make gut decisions off of what they feel about the information. Thinkers make logical decisions based off of what they think and analyze about the information. So you see 2 of these 3 scores have already been tied to information. The last one, judger versus perceiver. Judgers need information that tells them how to process and orient themselves in the world around them. Whereas perceivers, they just perceive where they exist in the world around them. They perceive a left boundary, a right boundary, and they just stay inside those boundaries. It's not the same as a judger who needs to know exactly where they sit. So all the MBTI is an understanding of information versus and energy. So that is why it's such a useful tool.
So if people take that, get a sense of themselves, how do they leverage that to figure out what they're feeling?
Once you understand your relationship with information, you're able to understand what it is that you can't process. So if you're somebody who needs to see data to process it, and you're having an emotional reaction to something, there's no data for you to see. So it makes sense why you're confused. So then you have to pursue a solution to the sensory input of the information. My wife and I, probably every 2 years, we go back into marriage counseling. So we're like in for a year, out for 2 years, in for a year, out for 2 years. Like this is our cycle. For anybody out there who's had marriage counseling, I don't know what your cycle is. If you have a cycle at all, I have found this to be very useful for us because—
How long have you guys been married?
We've been married 14 years, 14 years that in 2015 years this upcoming year. And we started marriage counseling about 2 years after we left the agency because the agency was our therapy for a long time. But it was not very good therapy. It was, you're fucked up and they want to keep you fucked up. So then we get out of the agency and like, I find out that my wife's identity is tied up with the agency and she finds out that I never really liked the agency. I was always learning from it. So, it's like rediscovering each other in 2016 when we left. But my point is, as we go through this cycle, one of the things that I find so interesting is that I always discover something new about how she engages with information. The business, current events, parenthood, where we live, where we travel, vacation planning, you name it, right? There's always something new that I discover because she is the opposite MBTI of me. Exact opposite, right? I'm ENTP, she's ISFJ. Polar opposites.
That's interesting.
So for about a year, we're like learning about each other again while we're in counseling. And then we go through 2 years without counseling. And for the first 6 or 9 months, like we're pretty good. We're still riding the high of what we learned about each other. But then life changes in year 2. Something new. The business has doubled in size. The kids have doubled in size, right? Like there's a puppy in the house. Something changes or multiple things change. And we lose our true north because there's new information. And I don't know how to think like she thinks. I know how she thinks, but I can't recreate it.
Right.
I can like artificially try, but only she knows how she thinks. So then we end up back in counseling again where I learn more about her and then the cycle continues. When you know what you need, for me, I now know she needs to see data. So when I try to tell her something that's exciting to me, if there's no data to show it to her, I can't expect her to get excited, right? We have huge news in 2025 that we're going to be announcing after January 1st. You will be one of the first people that I visit with it, right?
I can't wait.
Huge news to announce. I take it to my wife. I'm like, can you believe it? This is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. And she's like, okay. Because until it happens, she can't touch it. She can't feel it. She can't believe it. It's just an idea, right? My wife is not a Trump fan. Not at all. The vast majority of our clients were supportive of Trump because we deal with a lot of high net worth and ultra high net worth clients. She was like ambivalent to the elections, watching Kamala Harris, watching Donald Trump, watching it all play out, but there wasn't anything finalized. And then as soon as the election was finalized, then she had big opinions, right? Because it was real to her. That's not how I work. For me, my peak excitement, my peak enthusiasm was probably 2 weeks after Biden nominated Kamala Harris, because that's when you started seeing her ads on every YouTube video. You started seeing her everywhere. That was when I was like, oh, I see how this is going to play out now. And that was my peak of excitement. And then everything else was just kind of as I expected, more or less.
Right.
That's just how we work. So when people want to understand something that they can't define for themselves, if they understand their MBTI, they understand what area they're not understanding. their feeling. It's lacking logic. It's lacking proof. They're too idealistic. They're looking for a structure. There isn't a structure yet. And once you know what's missing, you can find that thing that's missing in a book, in a podcast, with a guru. It was a very long answer to a very simple question. I apologize.
No, it's very useful, especially I think we're going to go through a very weird time as the world order is shifting, as we have embraced as a voting public that we want somebody to come in and disrupt the system, to use the nicest word possible. There's going to be a lot of change. And to your point about people having to relearn themselves and other people, I think it's going to be pretty disruptive.
I think disrupt is the right word to use, though. I don't think it's just the nice word. I think it's the right word. So I just want to validate that for you, because to put anything else on it is to start making it a subjective assessment. Whereas disrupting the current status is very, very accurate.
No doubt. Andrew, I love every second I get to spend with you. Where can people follow along with you?
Absolutely. You can find me on my homepage, everydayspy.com. We've got links in the description, of course, here, and with show notes always for you. You can also find us online at Everyday Spy on any of your social media platforms. And we have a very successful podcast ourselves called the Everyday Spy Podcast.
Yes, you do. All right, boys and girls, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
It's pretty clear that whoever is the next president is going to have to deal with some sort of U.S. government debt crisis. And I'm concerned about how that response is going to be, regardless of which candidate wins. So, for example, Trump, in his case, when there was a major economic